So picture this. A fortress, packed with soldiers, outnumbering the approaching army 5-1. 5-1. And every single man in there is acting like they just watched their own funeral rehearsal. Guys are sprinting to the walls. Some are literally praying. The knights are barreling the gate shut with planks and chains and whatever junk they can drag through the rain. And then some poor bastard whispers, "We should surrender. The Black Deer is merciful." And another guy goes, "The Marquis ordered us to hold," before getting cut off by a voice that absolutely should not have been inside the fortress. Calm, unfamiliar, telling them to listen to their men. Everyone turns around, and there he is, just strolling through the rain, red eyes glowing under his hood like a discount horror movie villain who actually showed up to the audition. Someone screams, "The Black Deer," and this guy raises both hands and goes, "Please, stop. I do not wish to hurt any of you. My only wish is for all of you to surrender." Which, sure, very polite of him. Very considerate. Hey, I'm going to conquer you, but I'd rather not. So, just fold. Love that energy. But that's the future. 15 before all that nonsense. In the month of the Black Deer, we gotta go way back. Way back. To a dead garden. Baron Robert stood on his terrace looking down at what used to be something the kingdom could be proud of. Widow's Wall. And now there was no green. Not a weed. Not a stubborn little blade of grass trying to make it work. Nothing. And the rain hadn't come in weeks. But that wasn't even the real problem. The real problem was the war. Robert's standing there whispering to his wife Mira that this is his fault, and Mira, who's got a shawl wrapped over scarred shoulders and absolutely zero patience for her husband's pity party, tells him to shut that down. She says it's the veil consuming their land. Robert shoots back that the dark forest has been asleep since before his father's time, and it's this stupid war that took their men, their coin, their hope. He's looking at dead orchards, listing off everything that's gone wrong. Mothers without husbands. Children without fathers. Refugees. Empty bellies. And then Mira touches her stomach, and Robert catches himself mid-sentence. He says maybe it's mercy they don't have a child. What kind of world would they bring one into? And Mira grabs his face with both hands and says, "A world where he is loved, Rob." Which, yes, sweet. Robert tries to argue, points at the glowing fog beyond the barony, starts going on about the dark forest staying asleep, and then stops. Squints at the sky, asks if that's a night arrow. Mira looks up. The clouds are lit up. A flying star is dragging light across the darkness like ripples in water, and Mira gasps and tells him to make a wish. Robert, being the most fun man alive, calls it a skyrock and says wishes are for children and fools. Mira says the gods will still love her even if she's both, and she starts praying under her breath. "Please give us a son. A child brings luck. Hope." She takes his weathered hand and asks him to pray with her. Just this once. Robert looks at the dead garden, looks at his wife, sighs the sigh of a man who knows he's lost this argument, and says okay. For her. But then he asks which god they're praying to, and Mira just goes all of them. The 7 laws, the Earth Mother, Vulcan, all of them. Robert almost smiles. Almost. He joins her in prayer, starts reciting something about the sovereign of the 7 laws, but unlike Mira, he doesn't close his eyes. He keeps watching the falling star, and it gets brighter, then brighter again. Robert takes a step back. His finger is shaking. He goes, "Something is amiss, Mira." Mira, and Mira, eyes still shut, sighs at him like he's being dramatic at church. "Have you never seen a night arrow, Rob? They are the gods' arrows. Mind yourself. Pray." And then she stops, because she sees it too. It's not getting brighter. It's getting closer, straight toward them. Robert grabs her arm and yells that if this is the gods' doing, the gods want to kill them. He tells her to run. Mira pulls away, steps in front of him, leaps onto the ledge, her shawl falling over Robert's face. She extends her left arm, and underneath are toned muscles and scars, and she breathes out 2 words. "Earth Mother, Shilda," and she's writing in the air with her finger. Smoke forms into symbols, flickers into bright light, and she grabs them. The light crawls to her wrist and shapes itself into a shield that covers her entire frame. She yells at Robert to get behind her. He says she can't shield them from a skyrock. She says then she'll shield him from as much of it as she can. She lowers her knees, bracing, and the skyrock stops. A yard from her shield. Just hovers there, floating above the terrace like it's looking at them. Mira follows it, steps down, keeps Robert behind her. It drifts to the middle of the terrace. And then it drops. The floor shakes. Cracks crawl through the stones and into the manor walls. Steam rises off it, smelling like molten iron. Robert whispers they should go, get the people, deal with it at first light. Mira is already walking toward it. He tells her not to touch it. Skyrocks are as hot as red iron. Even with the depth of her breath, it'll burn the flesh from her bones. She reaches out anyway, hovers her palm inches from the surface. Says it's warm, not burning, and heavy, heavier than anything she's ever felt. Robert points out she's half a breath to the third depth. She could lift a horse with one arm, and she's calling this heavy. He says maybe don't touch it. Let's call for the people. Mira punches the rock. A loud drum thump hits the air. Robert covers his ears. Her punch nearly collapses the terrace. Not a single dent in the skyrock. Mira stares at her fist, then at the rock. She's about to turn to Robert, but the rock shakes. Not from her punch. From inside. A tiny handprint emerges from the surface, denting it outward. Then another. Then another. The rock that Mira couldn't even scratch groans open from within. A tiny hand appears first. No bigger than a sparrow. Fingers curl around the crack. Two tiny hands pry the opening wider. Robert whispers it's a Veman. A Veil Walker. Come to punish them. Myra's shield flickers. She writes in the air again, slaps the word onto her shield, turns it into a large axe. She says if it's a dragon, they kill it before it kills them. Robert starts to say dragons haven't been seen in Aldwyn for hundreds of years. And then a head appears. Small. Perfectly formed. Crowned with hair like spun gold falling past tiny shoulders. Not a Veil Walker. Not a dragon. A boy. A beautiful infant boy. Robert squints. An infant. The kid crawls out of his stone cradle, and his tiny palm makes the already cracked floor groan harder. Then he looks up at them. Blue eyes. So blue that for a moment both Robert and Mira forget the dead garden, the war, the hunger, the sky that almost flattened them. And then the boy bawls. Full volume. No hesitation. The sound snaps Mira out of whatever haze had grabbed her. Before Robert can stop her, she's already moving, tearing strips of cloth from her dress. She scoops the kid up, wraps him, and his crying stops instantly. A giggle bubbles out instead. Robert stands there frozen. Mira, what are you doing? She brushes the golden hair from the baby's face. Look at him. Just look. The baby reaches up with one perfect hand and touches her cheek. Myra's breath trembles. She whispers, not an infant boy. Baby. Our baby boy. Robert stares. Mira says his name is Enel. Robert asks if she's already named him. And just like that, the falling barony of Widow's Wall got its heir. 13 years later, that heir is in a musty barn, quietly talking to a cow. I knelt in the straw with my forehead pressed against the cow's broad skull, golden hair falling around us like a curtain. She was old. Too old to pull, too weak to birth, but still useful enough to feed people one last time. I knew that. Father had explained it gently. Mother more plainly. Gregor the butcher had asked for my help, same as every year. But I stayed a little while. I murmured a thank you for her life. May her flesh nourish our bodies. May her soul be guided by the spirits back to the Earth Mother and protected by the sovereign of the 7 laws. My hands found the base of her skull. And then, without even breathing, I twisted her massive neck. A blast of wind rippled from my arms, and every tool in the barn clattered against the walls. But the cow made no sound. She just went asleep. I watched the light fade from her eyes, then closed them. Thank you. I will not waste what you gave. I pulled the bucket closer, pressed my fingers against her neck, and the skin opened without much resistance. Blood flowed neatly into the bucket. Not a drop wasted. I watched it in silence. Didn't look away. Gregor came in with 2 men after that, all 3 stepping respectfully. He said they'd take her from here. I nodded, slid both arms under the cow, and lifted her like she weighed nothing. The 2 men just made way. I turned and walked out. Asked Gregor where to put her. He started to answer, but my knees buckled. He asked if I was all right. I didn't answer right away. I turned my head toward the barn doors, then beyond them, toward the walls of Widow's Wall. I whispered that there was something in my ears. Voices. He said probably his wife baking bread. I said no. I hear the refugees talking. He said the refugees were outside the city. Which yeah, they were. Which meant I probably shouldn't be hearing them. But I was. The cow was already on Gregor's table when I finished washing my hands. He bowed his head once toward the beast before cutting, and I did the same. Thank you, I whispered. Again. Gregor smiled and said I'd thanked the cow a dozen times already. I said it just felt right. He called me a good lad, rolled his shoulders, grabbed a sharper knife, and looked me up and down. Said I was getting taller every day, 3 and 10, and already near his height. I said thanks to all the meat he fed me, then cleared my throat and straightened my back. Told him not to call me Baron. That title belonged to my father. He tried young lord. I said Gregor. He tried young master. I sighed and said just my name was fine. He said Lord Blackwood told them to call me young Baron. Said we might as well get used to it. I muttered that I told him not to. Gregor laughed and said I was starting to talk like him. Then Lisa, Gregor's wife, popped out of the back room covered in flour and told me to stay for supper. Stew, bread, the works. I said I'd be honored, but I had quests. She said I meant playing with the seamstress daughter and that she had ears. Then she laughed and said sometimes she forgot I was only a few seasons older than her son. She had pots older than me. I bowed and told her she still looked as beautiful and young as ever. She called me a flatterer and said it felt like yesterday I almost sneezed out their door. Gregor sighed and said they don't talk about that. The boy can't help being gifted with a blessed body by the sovereign. Lisa waved him off and shooed me out before her husband could keep me longer. I scratched the back of my head, stood up straight, and said tomorrow then. Gregor's voice dropped. He said that was the last of their cattle. I stared at the empty barn. Already, outside, Widow's Wall spread before me. Too large for a hamlet, too beaten down for a city. The walls around it proved it used to be something greater. Sprawling with people, but the houses looked ready to collapse. Weathered wood, cracked stone, roofs that'd shatter in a stiff breeze. And yet the people smiled. Almost everyone called for me as I walked. Young Lord Blackwood, come chase some chickens, they're on the roofs again. Little Baron, the apple tree you moved to my yard is bearing fruit already. Most bowed. Some waved. They'd been getting noisier lately, which made me rub my ears more than I wanted to admit. But while most people smiled and worked, some sat listlessly on the ground in tattered clothes, asking for coins and food, then stopped and bowed the moment they saw me. And it wasn't hard to see me. The long golden hair made sure of that. I waved, nodded, kept the smile up. Thought about the cow on Gregor's table. How many bowls it would fill. Looked at the people by the wall. Realized it wouldn't fill enough. Small knot in my chest. But I didn't stop. Kept walking. Back straight. Chest out. Until I saw someone hammering a poor tree with a wooden sword in an empty lot. She spotted me. Immediately stopped whacking the tree. Girl in men's garments. Bandana on her head. She pointed her wooden sword at me and announced, very seriously, that what I sought was not here, Vale Walker. And just like that, my straightened back relaxed. Shoulders dropped. All the dignity, the formality, the young lord routine, gone. I pointed at her and said, aha. What I sought was indeed here, peasant. It was the magical tree of breath. She gasped, stepped in front of the tree to protect it, started saying she wouldn't let me have the magical tree of, then stopped. Her voice went high-pitched. Why am I a peasant again? I thought I was supposed to be a hero today. I laughed. Told her peasants can be heroes, lamb. And I'm always the Veman. She trailed her wooden sword along my frame and said, look at me. I'm a brute. Last year I was only taller than her by an egg. Now she could stack an entire chicken on her head, and I'd still tower over her. I flicked my hair and said it wasn't my fault I was blessed by beauty and strength. Ah, life. She said my mother still brushed my hair. Called me a 9-year-old. Called me breathless. I gasped dramatically and said the gods sought to punish me for my beauty. Oh, whoa. And pointed out she was also breathless, last I checked. She told me to prepare, Vale Walker. I lowered into a stance, curled my fingers into claws, and announced I would eat her and skin her alive, peasant. The people passing by watched Lamb lunge and swing at their young baron. All of them shook their heads, sighed, and went back to their business. We played like that for hours until the fields turned orange and the clouds went dark. We ended up resting our backs against the battered tree, my eyes going deep bronze from the setting sun. Lamb sighed, caressed her wooden sword, pointed it at the wall surrounding our city, and said she was going to be a hero someday. She'd stand worthy beside me. She promised. I asked why she needed to be worthy. Said I liked her as she was. She shook her head. Said I was the Baron's son. One of the blessed. I asked if that mattered. She noticed me rubbing my ears again and told me to stop. Said even without my breath, I could pluck an entire tree with my bare hands. Knocked on the wood behind us. Said she was just a peasant. I told her my ears were unwell. I'd been hearing scratches everywhere. Loud noises. And there were no peasants in Widow's Wall. I stood up, reached my hand out to her. Said all of us were friends here. She pointed out I just called her a peasant. I said we were playing. She chid and reached for my hand. I waved it away. Stuck out my pinky finger instead. Stuck my tongue out. She chased me around the city, screaming she was going to tell the Baron I did something obscene. We ran until we hit a certain house. And Lamb stopped. Just stopped. I called her name. She didn't respond. I called louder. Nothing. I turned to look where she was looking. Her mother. Weeping openly in front of their house. Other people around, watching, shaking their heads at the sobbing woman. I asked what happened. Lamb whispered that her brother. She thought the Duke's men finally took him. They'd received the letter, but now, to war. My eyes went wide. I wondered when they'd take me. Lamb glanced at me, clutching her sword hilt tighter, and said they wouldn't take me. I was the Baron's son. I shook my head. Said we were all equal under the 7 laws. As a noble, I had a duty. And Lamb's voice went deep. The familiarity we'd had just withered away. She said, with respect, Your Grace, the sovereign can go fuck himself. I got out a single WH before she turned and ran into her mother's arms. I wanted to chase her, offer something, anything. But seeing her mother hold her that tight, I lost whatever strength I had to approach. I stared at my best friend for a moment longer, shook my head, walked home. An hour later, I was at supper with my parents. Not talking, just staring at my bowl. Thin soup, a heel of bread, meat Gregor butchered a week ago. For a Baron's family, we ate like everyone else in Widow's Wall. Maybe less. Wooden bowls, wooden spoons. No servants to pour wine because we didn't have wine to pour. I looked at my parents across the scarred table. Father's hands calloused from working his own fields. Mother's dress mended so many times it looked worse than our tattered curtains. Quiet dinner. Right up until I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since I watched Lamb's mother crying in the street. Father, mother, why haven't they called me to war? Both my parents froze. The piece of meat father had been lifting with his spoon slipped off and landed straight on his lap. He stared at it for a solid moment like it had personally offended him, then slowly looked up at mother across the table, mouth still half open. Mother stared back, silently willing him to answer. When he just sat there like a stunned ox, she kicked his shin under the table. Lightly, but enough. He cleared his throat, wiped his lips and beard, brushed food off his lap, and said I was not of age yet. Soon, he said. I pointed out I was taller than him. Mother nearly snorted her soup. She covered her lips fast, shoulders shaking, and father turned toward her with pure betrayal in his eyes. He tried to regain some dignity, said my height had no bearing on the matter, started to say there were, then gave up and told mother to say something. She smiled pleasantly and said this matter escaped her expertise. She knew beasts, not the politics of war. Father grumbled that all men were beasts. Mother said don't include our little Enel in that. He said I was a boy. He looked ready to stand, inhaled through his nose like he was defusing a bomb, and sat back down. I said, quietly, that I was taller than most kids my age in Widow's Wall. Stronger too. Gregor said I was worth 100 men already. Almost as tall as Gregor himself. Father said nothing after that. Just closed his eyes and tapped a finger against the table. Soft rhythm echoing through the hall. Mother opened her mouth, but he raised a hand. Said that was enough. Voice lower this time. Firmer. We'd speak of it again when I was of proper age. I tried to push. Mother placed her hand over mine. Shook her head. Motioned for me to eat. So I lowered my eyes and finished my supper in silence. Asked to be excused. Bowed. Took my plate to wash. And the second I was gone, apparently father pinched the bridge of his nose and let out this long, exhausted breath. Told mother they'd sheltered me rotten. That I was 3 and 10 and still stumbled through the world like a kid half my age. That people were whispering I was a simpleton and my height didn't help. Mother's voice sharpened. Said no one thought that, and if they did, we were the fools for not raising me properly. Everyone loved me. Father said that was different. He loved me too, but I knew nothing of the real world, and mother's bedtime stories painted it too beautiful and simple. I apparently thought all soldiers were good people. Mother pointed at herself and said she was an adventurer. He was the one who studied under learned men. He should have been the one reading to me. And it was his decision I wouldn't go outside the walls until I was of age. He said they decided that together. Mother corrected him. She said I shouldn't go to the academy. He was the one who decided to trap me here. He pointed at the window and said what was he supposed to do? Let me out there? The boy would be feasted on. The kingdom would take me because they'd think I was one of the blessed. Worse, they'd find out I wasn't. That I was not. Mother cut him off. Said I was their son. Father dropped his voice like someone might actually hear. Asked what if the crown heard of me? What if the prince? Mother's hand tightened around his. And father whispered that they said his highness killed a knight of the 5th depth when he was 9. 9. And the prince was only the prince. If the king looked this way, gods, the man could erase a city with a finger. Not with armies. Not with law. With a finger. Mother didn't answer. Father said that was why the dukes fought each other and never him. Because whatever his majesty was, he wasn't just a man on a throne. He was a god made human. Mother said the king didn't care for politics. If he did, the war in the north would have ended. Every rebellion crushed the day it started. Maybe he wouldn't care about our son either. Father's face twisted. He asked why I couldn't have just been normal. Mother barked his name. He dropped his head immediately, breathing hard. His thumb brushed the deep circular burns on her palm. Said he was sorry. All his fault. Asked if he even deserved to be father to such a wonderful child. An hour later, I was in the courtyard, changed into rougher clothes. Dirt on the hems, fabric nearly worn through at the knees. Looked poorer than most common folk. Wooden sword in hand. And without breathing, I lunged. The stone beneath my feet cracked. My blade sliced through the air toward Mother. She caught it with her own wooden sword. Sharp crack ringing across the courtyard. Sweat popped across her brow instantly as she pushed back, but her eyes weren't really on me. They were on the thin fractures spreading through the wood of my blade. She pulled back her other hand, started writing in the air, caught it, slapped it onto her fist, and breathed out 2 words. Mother, buff. The muscles on her arm compressed and hardened, gleaming like smooth iron. She told me I was too strong. Stepped back with a strained breath. Told me to go again. I leaped back, staring at her arm. Squinted. Tried to do the same thing. Wrote in the air. Whispered, Mother, buff. Nothing happened. Not a flicker. Not a spark. Absolutely nothing. Mother yelled at me to stop getting distracted and charged. I just watched her get closer. And closer. Let out a small sigh, closed my eyes for a beat, then leaped back at the last second. Her sword brushed past my nose. She roared at me to attack. I happily complied. This time she redirected instead of meeting it head-on, letting my blade slide past with the faintest scrape of wood. Better, she said. Remember, you are much stronger than other people. Again, we went for another hour. But unlike normal sword practice, I wasn't trying to hit harder. Every exchange got softer. Heavy blows became controlled ones. Cracks became whispers, until eventually the sound of wood colliding just disappeared entirely. Mother exhaled, raised a trembling palm, her other arm hanging limp. Said we were done for tonight. Threw her sword down. The wooden blade punched through the ground like it was made of fat. She started to say that was enough, and I raised my own sword, clearly about to mirror her. She screamed no. Froze me in place. I blinked at her. She asked what she told me about handling objects with care. I bowed my head. Treat them like a baby. Crouched down. Placed the sword gently on the ground. Mother let out this long breath, wiped the sweat off her brow, and her eyes went wide as she imagined what would have happened if I'd been allowed to do that. I had no idea what she was thinking. Pointed at her. Grinned. Told her she looked funny. She stared, then burst out laughing. Asked if she really did. I nodded several times and joined her. When the laughter faded, her expression got serious. Told me to lift the boulder again. The largest one. Pointed at this massive stone near the courtyard's edge, easily the size of a small house. Time to test my full strength again. My face lit up. I jogged over like a kid, which, given how tall I was, looked deeply awkward. Wrapped my arms around a convex part of the stone and lifted it clean off the ground without so much as a grunt. My boots slowly dug into the dirt from the weight. Mother's eyes went wide. Hands started shaking. She said that was enough. I dropped it. The impact sent tremors through the ground, rattled the manor's windows, knocked loose stones from the walls. I bounced back to her, excitement in every step. Asked if I was as strong as the heroes from the old songs now. She forced a smile. Swallowed hard. Said no. Said if someday someone claiming to be a hero approached me, I should pay my respects and run. Strength alone was not enough. I tried to argue. She said my name. I whispered, "Yes, mother." Disappointment leaking out of me like air from a punctured tire. She told me to go wash. I asked if she'd brush my hair after. And just like that, the disappointment lasted approximately 0 seconds. She looked up at my face and her smile went genuine. Of course. Then sleep. She laughed. Said I was taller than her, but still couldn't manage my own hair. Then asked why Lamb didn't join us tonight. I said Ansel got called into war. She went quiet. Realized why I'd asked my question at dinner. Said she'd visit them tomorrow. Told me to go. Said I stunk. I rushed back to the manor. Mother watched me disappear through the doors. Whispered something about how big I'd grow if I was already near a man's height. And then her body started shaking. Not just her hands. Her whole frame, like a leaf in a storm. She gripped her swollen, aching hand, shaking her head. But the pain wasn't what made her wince. She pressed her palms together, lifted her eyes to the darkening sky, and whispered, "Please. Not yet. He's not ready for what waits outside. And the kingdom isn't ready for him." Then she asked the sky not to let me meet the prince. Said he would try to kill me. He would fail. But I'd be so confused. And so angry I sought to try. Next day, sun barely up. I was already strolling through Widow's Wall. People still setting up shops that had almost nothing to sell and no one to sell to. The homeless were easier to see while the city was still waking. Sleeping under broken awnings, beside empty stalls, against walls that could barely block wind. Most stirred when I passed. A few tried to rise. I raised a hand. "Please, rest." Most obeyed. One didn't. A woman crawled toward my feet before anyone could stop her. Others reached for her, whispering apologies. I shook my head and crouched. She cried, "Thank you. Thank you for letting Murek seek refuge in the city. The Earth Mother blessed me for this." Murek would not forget. Her face was covered in fur. Small snout. Long ears folded back. A Canaan. I'd seen a few since the refugees started arriving, but none had ever looked at me like that. I asked if her name was Murek. She said yes. "Murek is Murek." Flinched when I reached for her. Said this dirty Canaan would dirty my hand. I lowered my hand. Bowed my head instead. Told her to speak no more of that nonsense. And forgave myself. I shouldn't touch a young maiden uninvited. She stared. Everyone around stared. I smiled. Offered my hand. Told her to stand. She only knelt to the gods. Her eyes trembled. She said I was a god. I sighed. "No, I am Enel." She said that was what Murek said. I told her I was fairly certain it was not, my lady. The others pulled her back, bowing, apologizing, carrying her away. My smile faded. I whispered I should build them homes. But homes needed wood, stone, and coin. Widow's Wall barely had enough of any. So I sighed, shook my head, kept walking. The greetings continued until I reached Gregor's house at the edge of the city. Knocked. Announced myself. The door creaked open on its own. I looked at my fist, thinking I'd used too much strength, but the door was still standing, so apparently not. Called for Gregor. For Lisa. Stepped inside. House looked darker than it should have with morning sun in the windows. Made my way to the back, stepped into the yard, called again. Said I knew there were no more cattle, but then I saw Lisa. On her knees. Hugging the fence. I rushed over. Asked if she was all right. Where Gregor was. She lunged onto me without warning, wrapped her arms around my waist. Cried my name. I lowered myself to look at her face. Red. Swollen. Asked what ailed her. Where Gregor was. He was nowhere in sight. Her voice cracked. They came before first light. Knocked on the door. Took her Gregor. I asked who. Monsters. She bellowed. The Duke's men. She'd pleaded before them and the gods. None listened. I looked to the side. For the war? It was a great honor to be called to battle. The Duke would reward. Lisa kicked away from me. Threw a bag at my chest. Grain rolled down my lap. I grabbed the small bag, grain still showering from it, and didn't seem to care she'd thrown it. She asked me, "Is Gregor's life worth a bag of grain?" I started to say the Duke. She exploded. May the Duke turn to ash by Vulcan's fire. They gave it expecting gratitude. Gregor was old. His legs frail. He'd sooner die on the way there. I said when he returns. She screamed in my face. My Gregor will not return. War is nothing but death. Why Gregor? Father kept letting refugees in, taking their land, their food. They had able bodies, even with injuries. Why not take them? I couldn't say anything back. She clasped her hands. Please bring my husband home. Please, my lord. My breath hitched. The confused look on my face withered away. My eyes cleared. I stood up, looked down at her, and pulled the knife from my waist. She gasped, knelt, stammered that she meant no offense. I said under the name of the sovereign of the 7 laws. Her eyes widened. I make an oath to you, Lisa of Widow's Wall. I whispered it gently, resting the blade on my palm, that I, your lord, will bring your husband home to your arms. And to the sovereign, I made an oath of promise. If I failed, be that I had no breath, they could take the blood from my flesh instead if my word was broken. She reached for my hand as I dragged the blade across my palm. Screamed no, then stopped. Blinked. My palm was completely unscathed. The iron knife had bent completely. She clutched her chest, sighed in relief, shook her head, whispered my name, said let's forget about this. Let the Baron handle. I bit my hand before she finished. She just watched the blood trail across my wrist, down to my elbow, then drip toward the ground. She dove forward, trying to catch the drop. Missed her hand by a single finger. She looked up at me. Nothing happened at first. Then the drop burst outward, creating a symbol of words around us, trapping us in a circle of crimson light. She sat up, eyes moving wildly. Asked what I'd done. I said this oath binds me. Not you. She said but. I said she asked. As your lord, it was my duty to answer. My hair was turning orange from the light beneath us. I spun the knife on my palm, handed it to her. Her head shook, breath stuttered, eyes snapping between the blade's shine and my eyes. She looked away, bit her lip, grabbed it, gritted her teeth, closed her eyes, drove the blade across her palm. Her blood dripped, mixing with mine. The dirt shook violently, drying the blood, leaving a deep carving in the ground. A symbol of oath. I took the knife from her gently, held her hand for a moment, then just walked away. She was weak, tried to grab onto me, fell to her knees, covered her mouth, watched me leave, whispered what have I done. Night came. Mother finished brushing my hair, set the comb on my nightstand, patted my head, sighed, asked how many shears she'd lost trying to cut it. I asked if she was jealous. She tapped my shoulder. I pretended to be hurt. Ow. She said people don't make that sound when they're hurt. I needed to work on that. Told me to scoot over so she could leave. Still had to wash my stinky clothes. I grabbed both her hands and wrapped them over my shoulders. She was surprised but hugged me tighter. Asked what bothered me. I asked if she despised me for doing something foolish. She laughed. Said I was always doing something foolish. The thread on father's hair grew thinner every day because of me. But then she heard me breathe heavy. Rested her chin on my head. Said her mother would always love me. Even if the world saw me as a monster, she'd sooner fill the land with their blue. Then she stopped. Pushed me aside to look at my face. What happened? What did I do? I said I'd done nothing yet. But what if I did? She sighed. Stood up. Patted her gown. Said her mother would always love me. Grabbed my cheeks. Kissed my forehead. Told me to sleep. I jumped into bed, snuggled under my thin blanket. She fixed my hair so it wouldn't hide my face. Asked if I wanted a story. I said not tonight. Felt tired. She pinched my nose. Said I'd grown now. Very well. May the Earth Mother guide my sleep. I said may she guide yours too, Mother. She hummed. Left quietly. Closed the door. My tired eyes snapped wide open. I covered my mouth, stifling a chuckle. Sat up. Quietly pushed my mattress from the frame. And there it was. Hiding underneath. A set of tattered armor. The family insignia scratched and barely visible. A fierce-looking deer with trees as antlers. Beside it, an old, weathered, ornamental sword. And a letter addressed to my parents. I stood up straight looking at the insignia. Held my breath. Thumped my chest. Placed the back of my fist on my forehead. A salute. Several hours later. Deepest shadows covering Widow's Wall. Lamb was dead asleep, muttering something about the Earth Mother dying. Then clutter. A figure through her window. Her eyes snapped open. Grabbed her wooden sword. Before she could raise it, the figure grabbed her hand and covered her mouth. Shush. She squinted. Saw bright blue eyes. Raised an eyebrow. Slapped my hand away. Whispered my name very loudly. Asked what I was doing. I shushed her again. Her eyes dropped to my slightly tied armor. Asked why I was wearing father's armor. And whether that was my curtain as a cape. I said it was mother's drapes. Asked if she liked it. I liked the color. She said the Baroness was going to kill me. Asked why. I said I was going to retrieve Gregor from the war. Casually. Like I was telling her I was popping out for milk. She only registered the word war. Jolted fully awake. Said she was coming with me. I said why did she think I was here? Told her to hurry and get dressed. I'd grabbed a sword for her. Axe was making his delivery soon. We'd hide in his cart. She didn't hesitate. Bandana on. Dressed. Followed me out the window. I handed her the sword before she even landed. Told her not to make noise, might wake her mother. She nodded. Walked carefully away from the house. Then her eyes landed on the pile of uncut firewood beside it. Her steps slowed. Slowed more. Stopped completely. She said my name. I said HM. She said she couldn't go. So while I was out here playing dress up in my father's armor and sleeping in a cart like the world's most overdetermined runaway, things back at the manor were going about as well as you'd expect. Mother had been knocking on my door for a good minute. No answer. She went in with this worried look, glanced back down the hallway where father was standing, lightly biting his nail, which, for a baron, is about as close to a full panic attack as the man gets. She asked if I wasn't feeling well, seeing what she thought was me still on the bed, completely buried under the blanket. They exchanged another look. Deeper worry this time, because I had never been sick before. Not once. Not a sniffle, not a fever, nothing. Mother whispered that I'd never slept this late. She made her way to the bed, sat beside the hump, said my name softly, pulled back the blanket. Lamb awkwardly smiled up at her. Good morning to you, Baroness. Stuttering like she'd been caught stealing pie. Mother gasped, scrambled back. Asked what Lamb was doing there, why nobody told her about a sleepover, and where was. She pulled the whole blanket off this time. Empty bed. She screamed. Where's Enel? Father barged in so fast, I'm surprised the door stayed on its hinges. Eyes on Lamb for a second, then scanning the room like I might be hiding under the nightstand. Where's my son? He rushed at Lamb, but Mother blocked him, motioned for calm. Whispered she'd talk. Went back to Lamb, who was now sitting up curled on the bed, chuckling awkwardly at absolutely nothing. Mother asked again, Where's Enel? Lamb refused to look at her for a moment, then slowly pointed at the nightstand, where a letter was resting. Whispered that I'd gone out of the walls. They heard it loud and clear. Father was about to bolt out of the room, but his steps paused. He turned back to Lamb, asked where, calmly, which, knowing Father, meant he was approximately 3 seconds from not being calm at all. Lamb gulped, said I was just exploring. Father squinted. Outside. Without her. And Mother caught it. Whatever he was hinting at. She lunged for the letter, nearly ripped the paper in half reading it. 5 seconds. Dropped to the floor. Let out this almost howling groan. Looked up at Father. He's going to the northern White Plains to get Gregor. Father's eyes closed. He already knew. But knowing he was right didn't help. He muttered something about his breath leaving him. Pinched the bridge of his nose. Said I wasn't ready to be outside. What if I encountered bandits? Mother said I'd be all right. She'd trained me for this very moment. No one would be able to hurt me. Father said that was exactly the problem. This is what they talked about. They always knew this would happen. But he should have talked to me. This was why I'd been asking about the war. Oh, his breath. Mother clutched her chest, stuttering, saying she'd trained me to hold back. Father shook his head. Said she was a hunter of the third depth. Bandits weren't as strong as her. What were they going to do? Mother said she'd ride. Father said no. Sat on the bed, made Lamb scoot over. They'd completely forgotten she existed. Said it was time to let me spread my wings. Mother grabbed his hands. Held tight. Father nodded, more to himself. The kingdom was a big place. Even if people saw me, they wouldn't know who I was. And then Lamb quietly raised her hand. Like she was in class and the teacher had forgotten to call on her. Said I was wearing Father's armor. His smile froze. The one with. Lamb confirmed. The one with Blackwood's insignia. Father made a sound like someone slowly letting air out of a very old, very tired balloon. Oh. Meanwhile, I was on a cart. A very old, very bumpy cart, belonging to a delivery man named Axe, who was currently sweating like he'd been personally tasked by the gods to transport a live grenade. The sun was hidden behind thick clouds stretching to the horizon. Unusually cold. And yet the man was dripping. I asked if we were there yet. He said we'd just started. I told him to let me know when we arrived. He glanced back at me. My back was straight. My hair was bright and glowing. Apparently, it looked incredibly weird seeing me riding a cart as old as his. Which, fair. Then he noticed my hands were covered in ink. Asked if I'd been hiding beneath the cart the entire time. I said yes. Of course. My plan was to hide until we were close to the battlefield. He gulped, said he was only going as far as Riverdown. His horses wouldn't survive further, and he needed to get back to Widow's Wall. I said then we'd separate at Riverdown. Confirmed it was the trade settlement. He asked if I'd visited before. I said no. I'd never been outside Widow's Wall. His eyes went wide. He offered some advice. Go home. Bring someone with me. I said Lamb was supposed to be here, but alas. He meant someone older. I asked who. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Couldn't name anyone. Most of the capable adults had been conscripted. I waved my hand. Said the counsel of the people was always appreciated, but sometimes a man must take his journey alone. He sighed. Said I was but 3 and 10. Big and strong my body might be, war wasn't for boys. I corrected him. I wasn't going to war. Merely retrieving Gregor, Ansel, and others who wished to go home. He tried again. I crossed my arms. Cut him off. Told him enough. And apparently, according to Axe's internal monologue, I sounded exactly like father doing it. He sighed deeper. Because here's the thing. Almost everyone in Widow's Wall had strict orders not to let me wander outside the city. Everyone knew I was one of the blessed. If the royal family found out, they'd take me, make me one of their own. And now Axe was practically delivering me to them. If Mother ever found out, he could only imagine his fate. He sighed again, was about to say something else. I pointed to the side of the road and yelled spirits. He nearly dropped the reins. Several tiny humanoid figures stood on a boulder beside the road. Gray bodies, rough like stone, hollow eyes, limbs as thin as twigs. One sat on top, another peeked from beneath. I waved. They immediately melted into the boulder and vanished. I slowly lowered my hand. Axe chuckled, said I think I frightened them. I frowned. They're spirits. He said I was also a giant in armor. I said I wasn't a giant. He said I was taller than him. I said most people were shorter than me. He said that didn't help my argument. I said he was just old. Crossed my arms. He laughed under his breath. Quiet for a moment. Just a moment. I asked if he'd seen many spirits. He said he'd lost count. They were everywhere. I repeated that. Everywhere. He said there was probably one sitting on my shoulder right now. I froze. Completely rigid. He laughed. Said I needn't look so stiff. I said I was being respectful. He said of course I was. I very carefully turned my eyes toward my shoulder. Nothing there. I accused him of lying. He grinned. Said spirits were everywhere. That was no lie. I narrowed my eyes. Said Mother never told me that. He said perhaps the Baroness didn't wish to frighten me. I sat up straighter. Please, Axe. I was not a child. He started to say if I say, but I nearly stood up, shaking the entire cart, fingers trailing in front of me, following a spirit that crossed the road. Did you see that? He said he did. It disappeared into the grass. He said that was generally what spirits did. They chose where and when to show themselves. I stared at the grass for several moments before settling back down. Asked if they could understand us. Some could. Speak. Some could. Fight. Some could, Lord. He pointed toward the distant hills. Asked if I knew what breath was. The gift of the gods. He said so they teach. I repeated it. So they teach. He shrugged. Said his grandfather used to say spirits carry the gods' whispers through the world. Whether that was true, he couldn't tell me. I asked if he had a grandfather. But he was old. He laughed. Said a long time ago. Glanced back at our cargo. Asked if Mother ever told me the dark forest wasn't always dark. My eyes lit up. No. He smiled. Said that was a story worth telling. Long ago. I cut him off. If spirits were everywhere, how many were listening to us right now? He glanced around. Said the land itself listened. And as he was saying, he went on and on, pausing only to point at things along the road. Fortunately, no brigands blocked our path. Or, well, fortunate for the brigands, really, that they didn't run into me. The journey went another hour. And then finally, through the clouds and the cold and the endless bumping of the cart, I saw it. That's Riverdown. Axe grabbed my leg because I stood up on the cart and nearly launched us into the stratosphere. The wheels cracked. The horses snorted and literally shook their heads at me like I was a disappointment to their entire species. I wasn't listening to a word he said. I was too busy staring at Riverdown. It was a massive, lively settlement built entirely on a giant bridge. I was whispering to myself about how many people there were, pointing at carts passing by with all sorts of cargo, completely ignoring Axe telling me to sit down before I broke his axle. When I finally realized people were staring at the glowing blonde kid on the cart, I sat down and tried to brush the dust off my armor's insignia, only to realize I was peeling off actual crusts of old paint. I stopped immediately before I erased my own family crest entirely. Maybe I needed to find a painter. But then I got distracted by the massive bridge ahead. The houses were literally built on the bridge. We got to the checkpoint, and Axe pulled out a scroll to show the guards. From Widow's Wall. The guard barely glanced at it, told Axe he was late, and hoped he didn't run into bandits. And then he saw me. Clean blonde kid, bright blue eyes, sitting next to an old man in a rickety cart. The guard checked my weathered noble insignia and snapped to attention so fast I thought he'd snap his spear in half. Axe hesitated, then just gave it up. Trying to hide me was like trying to hide a dragon in a phone booth. He told the guard I was Baron Blackwood's son, here to check the town and join the war efforts. The guard stiffened, yelled my lord. I raised a palm, dropped my voice an octave to sound more authoritative, and told him I wasn't his lord and to not let me distract him from his work. He yelled yes my lord again. Axe snapped the reins, and we rolled through before the guy could ask anything else. The guards immediately started whispering to each other. One asked if they remembered the Blackwoods having kids. The other told him to focus on his duties. But the first one couldn't help staring back at me, whispering in pure awe that he'd never seen anyone look more like a noble, mostly because my hair was practically glowing in the sunlight. I didn't notice. I was used to people gawking at me back home. Axe stopped the cart at his destination. My tour was over before it started. I hopped off, my red cape and golden hair snapping in the wind with an audible snap. Ladies nearby covered their mouths. Husbands covered their wives' eyes. Standard stuff. I bowed to Axe, thanked him for the ride. He said it was his luck I was with him. Otherwise bandits would have eaten him for supper, and he didn't even have to use his ward for the first time in years. I asked if bandits were cannibals and immediately grabbed my sword hilt. He sighed, said no, and asked if I was sure I was good on my own, if I even knew where to go. I confidently told him I had absolutely no idea. He started to argue, but I cut him off. Getting lost and finding your way is part of the adventure. That's how it went in all of Mother's stories. Then someone screamed thief. I snapped my head around. A little boy was sprinting toward me, clutching a loaf of bread in pure panic. I looked at the woman screaming, looked at the kid, and just stood directly in his path. The kid practically bounced off my leg and landed hard on his butt. He panicked, seeing the woman closing in, but before he could even scramble up, I hoisted him into the air by his collar. He struggled. That was cute. Axe rushed over, saw me reaching for my knife, and started praying to the gods to help this boy. The woman caught up, panting, thanked me, called me my lord when she saw the armor. I asked what he stole. Just bread. She saw my hand on my dagger and started backpedaling fast, saying it was fine, they had plenty. I told her I'd pay for it. I grabbed my coin pouch instead of the knife. Axe nearly had a heart attack, clutching his chest. He knew how lawfully inflexible I was. The woman said it was 3 copper wins. For bread. I stared at Axe. He just shrugged. I handed him the pouch and told him to pay her. He did, shoot her away before she could bow 100 more times. The crowd sighed in disappointment because they really wanted to see a public beating. The kid groveled. I backed away. He kept thanking me, putting his palms up, saying he'd never waste the bread. I blinked, asked what he was talking about. He looked up and realized his hands were empty. I was holding the bread. I ripped it in half, gave one to Axe. Told him to eat it well. It was very expensive bread. Axe hesitantly took it, said the price was right. The kid stood up and asked, very politely, if that was his bread. I stared at him. Why would it be his if I paid for it? He looked at Axe for help. Axe looked away, completely ignoring us. The kid said he was hungry, hadn't eaten in days. I scanned him. The kid had more meat on his bones than any refugee in Widow's Wall. I told him he seemed able-bodied, asked why he couldn't find work in a busy place like this. He didn't have an answer. I remembered the bread cost 3 coppers. I offered him a deal. I'd give him gold to buy bread if he served as my valet until I found my passage to the war. His eyes lit up. He knew where the caravan was gathered. Axe asked if I'd be all right. I told him not to fret. All my quests with Lamb had prepared me for this. Axe muttered that those were pretend. I asked what. He said nothing. I told the thief to let's go before he surrendered to the guards. He was confused. I flipped my cape and walked off without a care. Axe watched me go. Whispered young Baron to himself. remembered me strutting around Widow's Wall with Lamb, terrorizing the place with our pretend quests. Then his soft look vanished. Pure dread. He unlatched a horse from his cart, ignoring the guy screaming at him about the cargo, jumped on, and rode off like the hounds of hell were on his heels, muttering that he had to tell the Baron that I mustn't reach the war. Meanwhile, I was strolling through Riverdown with my new thief. He asked what I meant about surrendering to the guards. I told him a thief must be punished accordingly. He said he was a child. I said then he'd only be flogged a few times. Told him about when I broke father's vase and it didn't hurt. Told him to take the punishment and the sovereign would forgive him. He asked what the fuck a sovereign was. I asked what he said. He quickly bowed and said, "Mercy, my lord." I sighed, said it wasn't up to me to show mercy, and went back to looking at the shops. He tried to run, bumped right into my stomach. I put a hand on his shoulder, asked if he didn't want to be paid. He was shocked I was paying him. I asked if you don't get paid for service here. Asked his name. He said Tiny. I said it suited him. Then I saw a stall, pointed at it, asked what that was. Tiny said glazed grilled fish. I asked what it tasted like. He didn't know, never had it. I walked over. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. The vendor's eyes lit up like I was a walking bag of gold. He offered me a skewer, said it was seasoned with salt, pepper, and sugar. The smell hit me, and my whole body shivered. I didn't let on that I'd never actually tasted salt and real sugar together in my life. I cleared my throat, asked the price. He said it was free, just wanted me to visit more. I snatched the skewer immediately. Was about to bite it, but noticed everyone staring. Even Tiny was drooling. I leaned away, took a deep breath, and took a massive bite. The vendor screamed that it still had bones. He was terrified I'd choke and have him beheaded. I just chewed, squinted a bit. My eyebrows lowered. I turned around and walked away without a word. Tiny hurried after me, asked if I was looking for something. I asked where the people living in the streets were. He said there weren't any. I blinked. Widow's Wall had them everywhere. I looked at the fish, looked at Tiny, and handed him the skewer. He was confused. Asked if I didn't like it. I cleared my throat. Said it didn't suit my tastes. Expected it to taste how it smelled. Told him to eat it while he led me to the caravan. He happily devoured it. I watched him touch his cheek and couldn't understand how he liked it. It tasted good at first, a bomb of flavors, but then this weird, strong aftertaste hit me. I subtly stuck my tongue out to let the air wash it away. I asked if it was always like this here. People moving without pause. Tiny shrugged, asked if I'd never been here. I said I'd never been anywhere. Father promised to take me to bigger cities when I was of age. Tiny asked how old I was. 3 and 10. Tiny almost dropped his stick. Said he was 3 and 10 too. I told him his name suited him even more. Told him he was blessed with meat and green forests, should hunt instead of stealing. He asked if I was really 13. Said I looked like a knight. I smiled a bit. Said I wasn't. My father was a knight, but lost his breath in a hunting accident, which is when he met Mother. Tiny asked if Widow's Wall was the refugee city. I raised an eyebrow. Said we were a proud stronghold defending the lands from the Vale. Tiny quickly backpedaled. Said he must have heard of a different city. I asked what else they said about it. He hesitated. Said he heard it was a dying barony, and the baron was poorer than a peasant. But seeing me, he definitely meant a different city. I asked where he heard this. He said the Duke's soldiers. Said they always get men from there because the city can't offer anything else. He spat on the ground. Said he couldn't imagine living in a place like that. My hand curled into a fist. Tiny swore he heard iron groaning. I asked where these soldiers were. We ended up standing in front of a tavern with a fish painted on the sign. I was observing it. Tiny asked why. I said the Duke's soldiers might be inside. He asked why we didn't go in. I told him I wasn't of age. He stared at me. The door swung open and nearly hit him. A guy stepped out. Smelled like ale, smoke, and bad decisions. Huge shoulders, arms thicker than Gregor's, cheap adventurer insignia. He took 3 steps and bumped into me. Or tried to. He bounced off me like he hit a brick wall. I apologized. He squinted at my hair. Tiny covered his nose from the guy's breath. I asked if the soldiers were still inside. The guy rubbed his nose, said no, left hours ago. Most of them. Some might be by the caravan. I told Tiny we should go. The drunk guy perked up, asked if we were going to the war caravan. I said yes. He asked if I was joining. I said I had a different quest, but my journey was to the war. He looked at my washed-out armor. Said I was a lord. This war was for common folk. I said I was common folk. He said I was a noble, A pretty one. Almost a woman. I said all are common under the gods. He liked that. Said he was going to the caravan too. Told us to follow him. Tiny laughed, said they wouldn't let a drunk join. The guy laughed louder. Said they'd take anyone. Old men, young men, desperate men, stupid men. Especially stupid men. War loves stupid men. Asked if I was sure. I said yes. He said let's go. Told Tiny to follow as my squire. Tiny immediately puffed up and said yes. He was squire to the beautiful knight. I paused. Said I wasn't a knight yet. The guy stepped forward, completely ignoring the cart rolling straight at him. The driver was screaming at the horses. The drunk guy turned, sobered up instantly, raised 2 fingers, started writing in the air. Sovereign has. The symbols barely formed before the horses were on him. He gritted his teeth. I stepped right in front of him, reached out, gently touched one horse by the neck, the other by the head. Didn't grab, didn't shove, just guided them. Exerted zero force. The horses screamed and moved aside. The cart, however, kept coming. I didn't move, just looked down. The cart hit me and violently cracked. Wood burst, splinters shattered against my eyes. The front broke apart, wheels snapped, the whole thing toppled. Helmets, greaves, broken swords, dented shields, mail torn open and painted with dried blood rained down on the stones. A helmet rolled to my feet. Still had hair and scalp attached to the rim. Everyone gasped and scattered. The drunk guy sat on the ground, completely sober. Stared up at me. My red cape settled, golden hair glowing in the sun. The driver stumbled down, fell to his knees, begging for mercy, screaming that the horse panicked. I ignored him, crouched down. He flinched. I just picked up the helmet, placed it gently by the road. Picked up a greave, a cracked shield, stacked them neatly. Tiny rushed over to help. The drunk guy slowly stood, looked at the armor, then at me, and quietly started carrying it to the side. That was all it took. Once a noble started cleaning, and a thief and a drunk joined in. Everyone else realized standing around looked bad. Vendors, guards, women with baskets. In a minute, half the street was clearing the wreckage. The cart owner kept bowing, pale as a ghost. I told him I'd pay for the damages. He practically shrieked no, it was his fault. I said he didn't harm me. He kept begging. I let it go. Road cleared. Horses calmed. I held up a bloodied gauntlet. Asked where they came from. He glanced around. Said from the war. I asked where the men who wore them were. He blinked. Said dead. I looked at the massive pile of gear. Asked where their bodies were. He said at the battlefield. I squinted. Said we need to honor them. The drunk guy stepped closer, slouch gone. Said there's no time. Lord Commander Duncan is desperate to end the war early. One last push against the northern barbarians. Means more to sell to looters. The cart owner lowered his head. Said he only gathers what's left, cleans it, mends it, sells it to those who need steel. I handed the gauntlet back. Told him he could go. He bowed so low his forehead nearly cracked the cobblestones and scampered off. I turned to the drunk guy and Tiny. The guy clicked his tongue. Said his name was Ulf. Ulf of the East. I said I was Enel. Paused. Looked at the sky. Looked around. Said Enel from the southwest. Ulf stared at me. Looked at my scratched insignia. The deer with trees for horns. He said Widow's Wall. Tiny started frantically waving his arms to shut him up. I asked if he knew of it. Ulf said he'd been there long ago. Said common folk smiled there despite their suffering. Extremely poor compared to other frontier houses guarding a veil. I looked down. Extremely poor. He started to say with a lord like me it was no wonder they. But Tiny jumped between us, screaming about the caravan leaving. I nodded. Said let's go. The caravan was at the far side of Riverdown. Just carts, crates, and a bunch of people who were definitely not warriors. I looked for the Duke's soldiers. Only one in armor was me. A guy with a thin mustache approached. Eric of House Fafnir. Tiny snorted at the name. Eric asked what he could do for me. I asked where the soldiers were. He smiled carefully. Said they departed. Left him to handle affairs. Asked if I needed something for them. I said no. I was here to join the war effort. Momentarily. He blinked. Asked if I had a letter from my house or a seal from Lord Blackwood. Before I could answer, Ulf slung an arm around Eric's shoulder, turned him away, and handed him a pouch. Whispered something. Next thing I knew, Eric was shaking Ulf's hand, smiling. Told me if the young lord wishes to support the kingdom, who was he to stand in the way? Said he'd arrange a place for me on a cart. I watched Eric walk off. Asked Ulf if I just saw him bribe the man. Ulf said he merely encouraged him. With coin. Ulf said winds are already encouraging. The face of the first king still has an effect. I narrowed my eyes, but he ignored me and pointed to a cart. Told me to hurry. I hesitated, then turned to Tiny. Handed him some coins. Payment for guiding me. Told him his service was done. Go surrender to the guards. He looked at the coins, the caravan, and said he thought he'd come with me. I told him no, his punishment would be worse. He bowed. Said he'd join the war and serve as my squire. I said I wasn't a knight. He said I would be. A hero knight. I imitated father, stroked my chin. Said very well, he could accompany me. But when we return, he still must surrender. He asked if I was joking. I said no. Meanwhile, back at Widow's Wall, Mother was having a completely different kind of day. She was moving through the field, writing words in the air, slapping them onto her axe. Mother, fur. The axe burst into flames. She cleaved through a vemon that looked like a bear with hollow eyes and dried roots sticking out of its flesh. Then a smaller one, like a boar-sized hare with sharp roots for fur. Both burst into flames. She skidded, spun her axe, and the flames vanished. She looked over. Lamb was on top of the bear vemon, repeatedly stabbing its neck. Mother told her it was already dead. Lamb jumped off, wiped the sword I'd given her, removed her bandana to wipe her sweat. Looked toward the gate where townspeople were moving corpses. Mother whispered that made 9 today. Looked at the dark forest. Asked why now, when they needed to get to me. Lamb said I'd be fine. Asked how she did. Mother said she did well, much stronger than Mother was at her age. Asked if she wasn't scared. Lamb snorted. Said these monsters were nothing compared to me. Mother agreed. Lamb said she thought they'd be scarier based on the drawings in my books. Then she said they probably started appearing again because that monster is gone. She quickly added respectfully, Your Ladyship. Mother blinked. Asked if she meant no disrespect. Lamb said no. Asked if Mother thought they started moving again because I was gone. Said the wild animals were scared of me. Tiny asked how long the road was going to take. I gave him the most vague answer I could muster, but honestly, I was getting impatient too, and we'd only been out of Riverdown for a few hours. The cart hit a rock. Tiny bounced and groaned. The road was an absolute nightmare. Rough, uneven, covered in old roots that seemed personally offended by our wheels. Tall trees on both sides blocked just enough light to make the woods feel deeply unwelcoming. Every time we hit a stone, Tiny rose half an inch and slammed back down. I told him his balance was terrible for a thief. He immediately snapped that he wasn't a thief. Ulf, who was hanging a leg out the back of the cart, laughed loud enough to make people stare. Said he was a thief because he got caught. Tiny argued. Ulf made a joke about his little birdie. Tiny got mad. The cart hit another rock, and Tiny groaned about his arse, his legs, his dry mouth, and his chapped lips splitting open. Ulf winced, tossed him a water skin, told him to wet his lips before they cracked more, casually dropping the fact that he'd seen bigger men die from that. Which, wow, okay, glad I didn't know that. Tiny drank a little, wet his lips, handed it back without wiping his mouth. Ulf offered it to me. I shook my head, said I wasn't thirsty, told him to save it for those who needed it. Ulf just stared at me for a second, then smiled. Said I was unlike any noble he'd ever met. I asked if he'd met many. He said enough. Asked if they were all different. He said most were pompous little brats who thought the gods carved the world specifically for their feet. Tiny nodded like he totally understood. Ulf pointed the skin at me, said I was different. Saved his life, cleaned a street, paid a thief, joined a war, and hadn't complained once about riding in a cart that smelled like garbage. I looked around, asked if it smelled like garbage. Tiny sniffed near Ulf, and his face twisted in pure pain. I said I hadn't noticed. Ulf laughed, said any other noble would demand a horse, a tent, servants, maybe even a bard. I asked why. Why would a noble do that? A noble's duty is to serve and protect those beneath his banner. I serve the people. I said it without a single stutter. Ulf just stared, then burst into the loudest laugh I'd ever heard. People glared at him, but he was with a noble, so they just looked away. He wiped his eye, called me naive, said he didn't even know Widow's Wall had an heir. Tiny was nodding along to my words. I asked what he was doing. He said he was learning to be like me. I told him to learn not to steal first. Ulf laughed. Tiny noticed Ulf's cheap, scratched adventurer badge. Asked what rank he was. Ulf said not enough to be important. Tiny asked why he was joining the war. Ulf's smile thinned. He rubbed his badge, looked at the trees, and said he joined to silence the voices screaming inside his head. Tiny blinked and called him a half-wit. Ulf glared, threatened to cloud his ear, asked how he even knew that word. Tiny said because he wasn't a half-wit. I just watched them bicker. The caravan rolled on. Wheels creaking, horses snorting, branches scratching the carts. I was watching the spirits in the woods, minding my own business, when suddenly they all hid and merged with the earth. A scream cut through the trees. I snapped my head toward the noise. People on the cart froze. Some looked, most looked away. The caravan didn't stop. I stood up, the cart dipped, Tiny grabbed the side. I whispered that there was a coach. Broken, between the trees up ahead. Wool torn away, door open, long claw marks on the side. Fresh blood on the ground. Ulf saw it, jaw tightened. Said it was feral folk. I asked what that was. He sighed, said attacks were common. Wilderkin probably smelled food. Another scream, louder. I looked at the front of the caravan. Asked why we weren't stopping. Ulf said because it wasn't our responsibility. I stared at him. He sighed, said screams could be bait. Bandits use them. Feral folk too. You stop for every cry, you end up feeding the woods. Another scream. I didn't say anything else. I just stepped off the cart. Actually, I leapt. Hard enough the cart shook and nearly toppled. I vanished into the trees. Ulf screamed, grabbed the edges, stared at the whirlwind of leaves I left behind. Asked Tiny if I was always like that. Tiny said he only met me today. Ulf groaned, jumped off, and started screaming at the conductor to stop the caravan because Lord Blackwood went into the woods. Leaves exploded under my feet. The forest blurred. Branches as thick as arms struck my face and broke like dried twigs. I saw the first body, mangled in half, didn't stop. Another scream, and I burst into a clearing. Another coach dragged off the road. One guard by the wheel, another swinging his sword to protect the people behind him. Surrounding them were the feral folk. Over a dozen of them. Imagine a wolf and a goblin had a baby, then dropped it in a dumpster behind a seafood restaurant. Thick matted fur, faces almost like the Canian, but with solid black eyes and zero humanity. Just pure hunger. I drew my sword while running. Didn't stop. Past the first one in my path, blade went right through it. Split from shoulder to hip, zero resistance. Both halves dropped, and only then did everyone notice me. I stopped between them and the coach, red cape snapping. Pointed my sword. They all turned and stared. One opened its mouth, showing rotten, uneven fangs. The others did the same to intimidate me. It didn't last long. I vanished. Appeared beside the closest one, planted my fist straight through its open mouth, shattered its teeth, tore open the back of its neck. Threw the body aside before it finished twitching. The rest instantly closed their mouths. Nothing moved. Then they all scampered away into the woods. I didn't pursue. Just watched them go. Told the people they could breathe now. They were safe. They just stared. The wind blew my cape. The older gentleman in silk dropped his cane, bowed so deep his coat practically kissed the bloody ground. Called me a hero, said I saved them. I sheathed my sword, told them I wasn't a hero, told them to tend to the wounded before someone actually bled out. That woke them up. The younger man dropped his knife, nearly collapsed. People crying in the coach. The old man stayed bowed. I told him that was enough. He wouldn't budge. Said if I hadn't come, they would have died. Introduced himself as Ulrich Goldhand, humble merchant of Aragos. Offered whatever repayment was in his power. I crouched, which made him jump up. I told him again I wasn't a hero. I was from House Blackwood of Widow's Wall, Baron Robert's son. His face changed. I didn't catch it, but I noticed his apprentice, Ivar. The kid's face twisted, the exact same look everyone gave when my city was mentioned. He muttered Widow's Wall, that place filled with beggars. Ulrich yelled his name, forced his head down, apologized to me. I ignored them, looked at the wounded man. The woman was riding in the air, asking the Tide Father to lend her divine breath and heal the servant. Smoky blue words lit up. I whispered that she was a priest, totally in awe. She grabbed the glowing words and literally plastered them onto the guy's gaping wound. The words wrapped around it, compressed, and zipped the gash shut like a magical staple. The man's complexion returned to normal instantly. I approached, bowed to her, asked if he was able. She said with help, my lord. I said we should return them to the road, casually lifted one side of the broken coach with a single hand. Everyone's eyes went impossibly wide. Ulrich stared in bewilderment, then motioned his people to follow. Walked beside me, saying House Goldhand will remember this. They'll send gold, grain, food, whatever we require. I said it wasn't necessary. He practically pleaded, said it was. Asked to let an old merchant repay a debt, if not for me, then for the people under my banner. Widow's Wall. I was quiet for a moment. Nodded. Thanked him. Said our people were, as I was learning on my journey, in need. He was so relieved. Said House Goldhand would never forget the debt. By the time we reached the road, Ulf and Tiny were about to enter the woods. Ulf had his sword, Tiny had a stick. Tiny ran to me, saw the blood, realized I found them. Ulf muttered of course I did. Said he'd tell the conductor to leave men to help. Ulrich pushed Ivar forward to introduce us. Ulf smirked, took the boy. I told Ulrich this was where we parted ways, didn't want to delay them. Ulrich looked at the tired recruits and horses, bowed. Said the war would surely end once I reached the battlefield. My strength and Lord Commander Duncan would wipe out the barbarians. I shook my head. Said I didn't wish to wipe them out. They were people too, had innocence waiting at home. Ulrich literally lost his breath for a second. Smile gently came to his face. Said of course, my lord, it is as I say. I told him, may the sovereign keep him safe. He said may the Tidfair guide my path. I got back on the cart. Tiny followed. Told the drivers to continue. Caravan started moving. Ulf jumped on. No one spoke for a while. Someone spat from another cart. Ulf broke the silence. Said he knew that man. I asked if he was friends with Ulrich. Ulf said no one is just friends with Goldhand. They're the wealthiest family in the East, or close to it. Tiny's head snapped to me. Said that was convenient. Asked if I got something from him. I said his gratitude. Tiny asked if I got a physical thing. I said he offered to visit Widow's Wall. Tiny asked again, did I get something? I said I told him it wasn't necessary. Tiny looked like I'd just stabbed him in the chest. He explained, very slowly, that when extremely wealthy men offer to repay you, it's polite to actually let them. I said I did let him. Tiny looked at Ulf for backup. Ulf just shrugged and said I was his lord. Tiny sighed at the sky, literally asking the gods for the strength to deal with me. Light dimmed. Trees opened up. Caravans slowed near a massive traveler's inn. Stables, carts, smoke. Travelers and adventurers everywhere. I was in awe, quickly shut my mouth and straightened my back. Ulf snorted. Tiny had told him I was 13, and Ulf was starting to believe I might be even younger. I looked around, then stopped. Near the entrance, laughing with cups, were men in the colors of Duke gone. The Duke's soldiers. My hand curled into a fist. Tiny noticed, shoulders jumped to his ears. Whispered, maybe we should eat first. I didn't respond, started walking toward them. Ulf stepped in front, hand on my shoulder. Said nothing good comes from confronting them. I whispered I wasn't confronting them, just wished to speak. Ulf let me go, blocked Tiny. The men's laughter died when they saw me. Recognized the highborn, saw the scratched insignia, straightened up. The older one with a trimmed beard lowered his cup. I asked if they were soldiers of Duke Gone. He said yes. I said I was looking for Gregor the Butcher and Ansel, taken for the war a few nights ago. He looked at his buddy, who subtly shook his head. Said he wouldn't know, they weren't part of the war efforts. I squinted, asked if they were guards of the realm. He said yes. I looked at them, nodded, apologized for taking their leisure time, told them to carry on. They saluted, said may the sovereign guide my road. I said and yours, flipped my cape, went back to Tiny and Ulf. Told them to the inn. Tiny rubbed his stomach. Ulf stayed behind, listening to them whisper. They were talking about the heir of Widow's Wall, asking if most of them weren't dead, and noting Ulf was an origin sitting with a Hisker. I stopped just beyond the door. Tiny almost bumped into me. I said there were many kinds of people here. Tiny pointed at a Hisker, called it ugly. The Hisker glared, snake nose billowing smoke. Tiny hid behind me. Ulf dragged him away, told him not to stare. Adventurers like their privacy. Tiny stared at an origin with painted beak and glowing feathers. Ulf grabbed his head to make him look away. Eric of House Fafnir called out to us, waving us over to a reserved table. Tiny scoffed at him. Ulf just sat down, patted Eric. Eric said he arranged a room for me upstairs. Small, but the biggest there. I said it was unnecessary, I could sleep with the caravan. Eric insisted, held my hand, called the barmaid. Said my meal was paid for because Ulrich and his company rewarded them handsomely. I was surprised. Eric bowed, Said he also arranged a nightly visit for me, would see me on the morrow. Left before I could ask. Ulf slapped the table, told me to stop asking and start receiving. I said I could sleep outside. Ulf smirked. Said the common folks would be uncomfortable with a noble there. I sighed, took the room. Barmaid brought a basket of bread. I said we didn't order. She blushed, looked away. Ulf pulled the bread closer, told me to take it. Barmaid asked what I wanted. I asked what they served. She listed stew, roast onions, black bread, river fish, salted eggs, ale. I interrupted, covered my mouth at the memory of the fish. Said I'd have stew and salted egg, my friends would order. Ulf smirked at me calling them friends. Tiny pointed out I was a noble. I shrugged. Ulf told the bar to bring the keg. Tiny ordered fish, onions, stew, bread. Barmaid said she'd bring everything and put more meat in my stew. I thanked her. She stared a moment too long, then left. Food arrived. I leaned over the stew, inhaled the steam. Smelled meat, herbs, onions. Took a careful spoonful. Stopped. Tiny asked if something was wrong. I whispered it had many tastes I'd never had. Wished Widow's Wall could taste it. Tiny stopped eating. Said he wished his little sister could have tasted it too. I asked if he left her. He smiled gently. Said illness and hunger took her. Said if he knew Widow's Wall had a lord like me, they would have gone there. I looked down, remembered the refugees. The discomfort in my ears returned. Started rubbing them, eyes twitching. Ulf waved his hand, told us to stop soiling the food with depressing talk. We ate in peace. Listened to the adventurers talking about the war ending, barbarians pillaging, Lord Commander Duncan. The war in Mother's books was unrecognizable from the one they were talking about. Tiny leaned back, stuffed. Ulf just drank ale. I clasped my hands, thanked the gods for the feast. Tiny copied me. I stood up, told them they could share my room. Tiny sat up, excited. Ulf grabbed his collar, said no, they were fine with the caravan. Tiny argued. Ulf covered his mouth, started carrying him away. Said see you on the morrow. Tiny complained. Ulf shushed him, smirked, said he didn't want to get in the way of my nightly service. Tiny squinted, looked at the barmaid, realized what he meant. Said but his lordship is 13. Ulf's eyes widened, looked back at me heading upstairs. Said he was sure I'd be fine. Room was small. Narrow bed, basin, chair, window. I took off my armor carefully. Folded Mother's stolen drape cape with extra care, noticed the dirt. Knew she'd be mad. Sat on the bed, looked out at the dark caravan. Smiled thinking of Ulf and Tiny arguing. Smile faded. Looked at Father's armor. Thought about Widow's Wall. Realizing how truly poor we were compared to Riverdown. Even this inn was in better shape. Asked myself if we were bad nobles. Question stung. Knock at the door. I said yes. Barmaid opened it just enough. Top of her dress loosened, flushed face. Asked if I wanted company. I asked whatever for. To warm my bed. I blinked, touched the mattress, and asked why on earth I'd want my bed warm when it was already perfectly cozy. She just stared at me. I genuinely didn't get it. Asked why she was hiding behind the door like a creep. She said it was nothing. Asked if I truly required nothing else. I said I'd seek her if I did, complimented the stew. She said that was good to hear. I told her may the Mother guide her sleep. She stared, slowly closed the door. I stared back, wondered if something was wrong with the room. Lay down. Sleep didn't come immediately, but eventually my eyes closed. I woke up to pure agony. Sat up so fast the bed frame cracked under me. Clamped my hands over my ears. Thought someone had taken a baseball bat to my skull, but that was impossible. Nothing had ever hurt me before. I gritted my teeth, called out for Mother. The noise was just too much. I could hear everything. A guy coughing in the next room sounded like a cannon going off inside my brain. A rat scratching wood upstairs was sharp enough to make my jaw lock. Fire popping. Someone swallowing. A horse snorting outside. I curled into a ball, pressed my knees to my ears. Didn't help a bit. Heard Tiny muttering in his sleep. Heard Ulf farther away, whispering to himself, asking why he did those things, why they were screaming. Shook my head, pressed harder. Nothing. Then, through the pain, I heard laughter. Men outside. The soldiers. One said should have seen his face. Another asked Blackwood's boy. Said I, pretty little thing. Who was he asking about? Gregor and Ansel. The first one said remembered them coming through. Didn't matter now. Probably dead like the other lot from that garbage dump of a place. My eyes snapped open as they laughed. And just like that, the noise vanished. Everything went dead quiet. I sat up, tilted my head toward the window, dropped from the second story, landing right beside their table hard enough to splash ale out of their cups. One of them cursed, reached for his sword, but froze when he saw my golden hair and white sleeping shirt glowing in the lantern light. I stood there, hands trembling at my sides. And not from fear. I don't really do fear. I just stared at the older soldier. Told him, he said he didn't know them. Told him he lied. The soldier's hand froze near his sword hilt. His eyes darted from my loose golden hair to my white sleeping shirt, then down to the cracked mud beneath my bare feet. Ale was splashing across the table from where I'd landed, a cup still rolling in a slow, lazy circle. The older soldier swallowed hard. Said there must be a misunderstanding. I told him there wasn't. The other soldiers stopped laughing. Travelers outside went dead quiet, lowering their cups as they noticed the young noble standing in the middle of the yard. My ears were still ringing. The noise was too much, but all I could hear right now were their hearts, beating so hard it made me tilt my head. I didn't press my palms to my ears anymore. I wanted to hear them. I asked why soldiers of the realm would lie to its people. They swore they didn't know them. I tilted my head again, heard their hearts beat faster. Told them mother taught me people's hearts beat faster when they lie. Told them they were lying. The older soldier stammered about their hearts. I cut him off. Told him to say their names. He blinked. Asked what names. I told him he said them earlier. I heard him. He started to argue. I stomped my foot. Just a step, really. But the mud split beneath my heel. A tremor rolled through the yard. The table jumped. Every cup spilled. Acanian literally fell out of his seat. Most of the soldiers reached for their swords. Almost drew them. Then they stopped. Stared at my open hands. Imagining those hands around their necks. I repeated, with a frown, to say their names. The older soldier dropped to one knee. The others followed, looking deeply confused about where Widow's Wall was hiding a monster like me. He finally said Gregor. Gregor, butcher of Widow's Wall. I asked and he said Ansel. I glared. He lowered his head further. Gregor and Ansel, my lord. I told him he remembered. His voice cracked. Begged me to understand. Said they had no part in taking them. Weren't the men who entered Widow's Wall. Were guardians of the realm. An old man watching from the side suddenly pointed at him. Yelled that he was lying. He saw him chaining an older man when the conscripts passed. My head snapped to the old man. Asked if he chained Gregor. I stepped forward. Smoke started trickling from my eyes. A younger soldier panicked, started drawing his sword. The blade barely left the sheath before I was right in front of him, lightly pushing it back in. Before he could even look up, I was back in my spot. That's when they truly understood what was standing in front of them. I told them they carry the Duke's colors, the trust of the people they take, and names. The smoke in my eyes sizzled. Asked how they could lie about not knowing the names of those who fight for this country. The older soldier whispered that men pass through by the hundreds. I told him to remember hundreds. Told them to strip themselves of their armor. He asked what. I told him they didn't deserve to wear it. He lifted his head slightly, begged, said they had families, were just following orders. I asked if their order was to chain the men and women who fight and die. Asked if they were mocking the sovereign of the 7 laws. He said he wouldn't dare. I told him he lied about the people he took, laughed at Widow's Wall. If his armor meant duty, remove it. If not, why wear it? He started to beg again. I curled my hands into fists. My knuckles cracked so hard the soldiers felt a blast of wind. Told them everyone keeps calling me their lord, but I am a lord of Widow's Wall. Not theirs. They looked at each other. No one moved. I took another step. They started reaching for their clasps. Before they could remove anything, a hand rested on my shoulder. Ulf told me to calm down, kid. I snapped my head to him. He gasped, gulped, raised both hands, forced a smile. It lasted a second, but there was fear in his eyes. I saw it. The sizzle in my eyes started to wither. I saw Tiny behind him, pale as a ghost. Ulf softly said people were sleeping. My breathing was still heavy. I could hear every heartbeat in the yard. And Tiny's was the strongest. I told Ulf they lied. He said men lie. I said they are soldiers. He said yes, but they are men first. And so was I. The heat in my eyes died down. I glanced at Tiny, then the cowering soldiers, then the people watching. They all looked away. My breathing slowed. I looked down at my hands, realized I'd been gripping them so hard I could barely uncoil my fingers. Ulf whispered he knew what anger was like. Said it didn't suit me. Said these people weren't worth it, they're just stupid. Said he'd seen a worse monster in his own reflection. I said his name. He sighed, turned to the soldiers, waved them off. Told them not to show themselves until the caravan left if they knew what was good for them. They glanced at Ulf, then each other, and scampered away. People spat on their path. A Hisker woman bared her fangs at them, showing exactly how much respect they had for these guardians of the realm. Ulf asked why I didn't just join them at the camp. I nodded, followed him quietly. Tiny hurried after, glancing back once at the cracked ground. No one spoke around the campfire for a long while. We just lay beneath the stars. Tiny curled under a borrowed blanket. I lay on my back, arms at my sides, staring up. The stars were the same, but it felt so unfamiliar. Widow's Wall was missing. I whispered that I was wrong. Tiny shifted, said he didn't think I was. The soldiers were out of line. Even in Riverdown they strut like they own it. I closed my eyes. Said what I did was improper. I carry the name of House Blackwood. Ulf snorted. Asked if it was improper. I said I was angry. Tiny said I had every right. Ulf agreed. I said that didn't mean I had the right to do whatever I wished. Father taught me to be good to everyone, even sinners. Mother taught me restraint, but only to those who deserve it. Ulf smiled. Said that's what I did. I said perhaps. But if he hadn't come, thanked him for stopping me. He said he was just doing something he wished someone had done for him. The sins he'd committed. Tiny blinked, said he couldn't imagine Ulf angry. Ulf held his breath. Said he wasn't. That's what made them worse. I raised my palm to the sky, made him a promise. If his emotions ever called for him to do something violent he'd regret, I would stop him. Ulf breathed out an amused laugh. Said I came too late. Much too late for him. Meanwhile, back at Widow's Wall, Axe had returned, gone straight to the manor. Probably a mistake, because Mother had her weapon ready. Lamb was behind her, snickering at the thought of me adventuring with a thief. Fortunately, Father was outside bolstering defenses. Axe stammered he'd take Ned and Cedric and make haste. Mother stared at him, sighed, told him to get up. Convinced herself I'd be fine, though her face said otherwise. Brushed her thumb against the circular burns on her palm. Glanced at Lamb, who straightened up. Said she had a more urgent matter for Axe. Scout the veil. Axe blinked. Said Lamb was a child. Mother said she was one of the strongest and fastest warriors of Widow's Wall. Trains with her son. If anything happened, she could carry him and escape. Axe bowed. Said he'd have supplies ready, leave immediately. Mother told him whatever he found would decide whether Widow's Wall needed to be abandoned. The caravan moved at first light. No one spoke of the soldiers. At least, not where I could hear. Or maybe they did, and I just couldn't hear them anymore. That was the bothering part. The world still sounded sharper. Wheels creaked, horses snorted, birds called. Tiny's stomach growled loud enough to make me glance at him. But it wasn't like the night before. Couldn't hear heartbeats. Couldn't hear blood pounding or scratches in walls. After an hour, I turned and stared at Tiny's chest. He covered it like a girl. Asked why I was looking at him like that. I said I was trying to hear his heart. His face changed. Asked if I could do that. I said I could last night. Leaned closer. He leaned away until he hit the cart. Heard wheels, horses, axles, Ulf shifting, wind. Nothing. Confessed I couldn't hear it. Ulf clapped. Said maybe the boy doesn't have a heart. Tiny called him a half-wit. Ulf called him a sod. Cart was the noisiest again. People didn't mind. They were in a good mood after I showed those soldiers their place. Hours passed. Sun got hotter. Ulf praised the mighty solar for the bastard heat. Land opened into yellow grass and dry soil. Spirits were moving freely. Hundreds of them. But they merged into the earth because something enormous was moving between the hills in the distance. I stood up so fast the cart dipped. Tiny almost fell over Ulf. We both asked what that was. Ulf smiled. Creature larger than any beast I'd seen. Legs like towers, long swaying nose, curved tusks, flock of birds on its back. Ulf said it was a mountain horn. I whispered I'd only seen them in books. Tiny asked if it could be eaten. I said no. They're children of the Earth Mother. Harming them is blasphemous. Divine beasts from the time of the first king. Ulf shook his head. Said that wasn't why no one hunts them. Said he witnessed one die. With its death came calamity. Scavengers, beasts, thousands of them mowing through settlements to feast on the fallen behemoth. Conversation died. Watched the mountain horn for an hour. Still in sight. Journey went on. Not quietly. I made the caravan stop because an old lady dropped a sack of grain. Ulf said she was a witch. I said she didn't look like it. He said she was wearing darkness and had a nose large enough to poke me. Passed a Hamlet. Gave barefoot kids our leftover bread. Tiny complained. Well, broke on a wagon. Eric shouted to leave them. I lifted the entire wagon to a better spot. Everyone knew who I was now. Enigmatic young lord. Virtuous to a fault. Sun lowered, set up tents away from the road next to a large boulder. Stars scattered like spilled salt. Sat by fire with Tiny and Ulf. Listened to cinders. Ulf snorted. Tiny asked what. Ulf said he was thinking about the barmaid. I said I'd been meaning to ask, thought something was amiss with her. Ulf stared. Tiny lowered his bowl. I explained she asked if I wanted company. I said I didn't require anything. Tiny covered his mouth. Ulf's shoulders shook. I asked if I was rude, hoped I didn't offend her, thought she might be lonely. Ulf strained his voice, said I wounded her pride. Maybe, but not offended. I asked what pride had to do with it. She said she wished to warm my bed. It was warm enough. Ulf said that's not what that meant. I asked what it meant. He couldn't hold it in. Laughed so hard he had to put his cup down. Pointed at me, said I had a lot to learn. I said so does she apparently. Made him laugh harder. Tiny laughed too. Tightness in my chest loosened. Laughter faded. Tiny asked Ulf why he was joining the war. Said he keeps giving away coin, has none left, so it's not for pay. Ulf's smile faded. Said to shut the voices up. Asked what he meant checking his coins. Tiny said he heard him whisper in his sleep. Ulf scoffed, stared at fire, grabbed dirt, dropped it. Said he came to die. Tiny gasped. I sighed. Said to die in battle is a great. Ulf gave a sad smile. Said war doesn't sound so pretty now, we're not even in battle yet. I asked why he wished to die. He rubbed his face. Said because he was full of sin. Tiny whispered about the children he whispers about. Asked if he had children. Ulf scoffed. Said gods no, he's the last person deserving to have them. Tiny's eyes widened. Asked what he did. Ulf got quiet. Looked at me. Tiny, fire. Said he used to be a brigand. Tiny asked if he robbed people. Ulf's lips quivered. Covered his face. Said they raided small settlements. Hamlets, farms, shrines. Pillaged, burned. Tiny leaned away. I quietly said he was using war to punish himself. His jaw tightened. I said there's honor in seeking punishment. Sovereign will forgive. Law of amendment states. He raised his voice, bit his lip until it bled. Said no. Tears formed. Said don't give him that. Hand trembled. Reached for cup. Just held it. Said he hurt people. Women. Tiny stood up. Ulf closed his eyes. Said he took women from families. Hurt children. Tiny whispered children. Ulf said younger than Tiny. Smaller. Tiny's fists curled. Ulf said he killed them with his hands. In front of their mothers. Travelers too. Thought some might have been from Widow's Wall. Fire cracked louder. Camp disappeared. Just fire and us. Tiny looked at him in disgust. Whispered he was a monster. Ulf wiped his nose, nodded. I asked before he could say more. Were they sick? Ulf looked at me. I was only looking at fire. Said they weren't. I asked if they carried disease, would kill others. He shook his head. No. My hands on my knees. Asked if they had weapons. No. Voice trembled. Asked if they were already dying. Was it mercy? He closed his eyes. No. My breath paused. Tears gathered so fast Tiny whimpered. I muttered why. Why then? Ulf's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Said he was young. Cruel. Empty. No purpose. No God. No Lord. Worse than the barbarians. Tiny wiped his face. Ulf whispered it was easy. Did it again and again. Enjoyed it. My tears fell freely, gripped my cape. Told him he shouldn't have said that. Why did he have to say it? Now I have to. He didn't know. Said something snapped. Saw what he was. Ran away. Became adventurer. Tried to help. Gave everything to orphanage. But the voices won't go away. Going to war to bleed enough. I interrupted him. Said I asked the 3 questions. Gave him one more. Ulf stopped. I stood slowly. Said I wanted one of them to save him. Hand moved to sword. Tiny's eyes widened. Said wait. I drew it anyway. Voice shook. In the name of the sovereign of the 7 laws. Ulf of the East. Murderer of the most innocent. Ulf's face went slack. Tiny tried to approach. Said there is no path to his salvation. May the sovereign forgive him, because I cannot. Tiny's breath short. As a servant beneath his law, sentenced him to die. Tiny gasped no. Ulf's body moved on its own. Fingers rose, writing in the air. Tidfather, huh? Before words could glow, I grabbed his hand. Words faded to smoke. Ulf held his breath, stared up at me. I stared back, tears running. His arms strained, then stopped. Shoulders lowered, pained expression withered. Wry smile fell on his face. Whispered, "So it's me." Said he was sorry it had to be me. I held my breath. Drove the blade down through his shoulder, straight into his heart. His body jerked once. Pulled sword free. He dropped. Sword slipped from my hand. Knees struck dirt. Everything dropped. Fire crackled. No one moved. Camp was too small not to hear, not to see. Everyone quiet. I was on my knees, hands stretched forward, fingers shaped around a sword that wasn't there. Sword beside me, Ulf in front of me. Tiny on the other side, hands over mouth. Stared at Ulf, me blood. Whispered, "What have I done?" I couldn't answer. Breath felt like it belonged to someone else. Looked at Ulf's face. Relief was gone. Everything gone. Reached for sword, Tiny flinched. Hand stopped. Crawled closer. Placed fingers on Ulf's face. Closed his eyes like I did for cattle. He wasn't a cow. Wasn't a beast anymore. Just Ulf of the East. Voice trembled. Said I need to bury him. Tiny didn't move. Caravan did. Older man rose, brought a shovel, placed it steps away. Knelt. Offered one line of prayer. "You are now one with the Earth Mother." Left. I took the shovel. Tiny watched me walk away. Started digging. Ground was dry. Should have been easy. I could lift wagons, shatter stone. But digging without destroying the earth was slow. Had to hold back. Handle creaked. Tiny watched from firelight. Didn't help. Grave deep enough, others gathered in distance. Dispersed when I returned. Lifted Ulf gently, carried him to the hole. Tiny followed. Placed him in the earth. Looked smaller. Fell to my knees, hands folded. Whispered, "Sovereign of the 7 laws." Stared at body, prayer died. Said, "Earth Mother, he is with you now." Wind carried dust. Only answer I got. Covered the grave. Tiny moved closer. Eyes red. Asked if I thought he was my friend. I looked at the dirt. Said he is. Tiny's fingers curled. Asked why then. Closed my eyes. Said because it is my duty. Tiny looked away. Said he was sorry. I know. Tried to be better. I know. Shoulders shook. Asked what the point of trying to be better is. I had answers, but none. Wanted to say it mattered. Repentance mattered. Orphanage mattered. Saving people mattered. Laughing by fire mattered. It did. It had to. But he still killed children and let mothers watch. Said I do not know. Tiny stared. I opened mouth. He stepped back. Flinched, I froze. Swallowed. Said he's going to sleep. Walked away quickly. I remained by the grave until morning. Alone on the cart. Tiny rode elsewhere. Others too. Didn't notice. World continued. Wheels creaked. Horses snorted. Spirits moved. Road same. Sky same. Journey lost its color. Hands folded in lap. Sword cleaned. Sheathed. Didn't touch it. Felt so heavy. Carried it all day. Caravan stopped twice. Didn't move. Didn't help. Night came. Narrow river. Took my bowl. Walked away until camp couldn't see me. Sat by river. Placed bowl down. No hunger. Listened to river. Clasped hands. Whispered, "Sovereign." Asked the 3 questions. He answered. No answer could spare him. Said I hated him at the moment. Hated the person he was. But I do not. Frog croaked. Said I made it swift. Did what was required. What a noble should do. Didn't break oath. Didn't allow murdered children to go unanswered. Voice shook. Looked across river. Teeth showed. Scream tore through my throat. Rippled air, blew away water. Camp heard it in their stomachs. Lasted a moment. Stared across river. Asked why it feels like I am wrong. Hands fell to damp ground, through mud. Asked why it hurts. Why so heavy? Clasped chest, covered family insignia in mud. Asked why my hand still feels it. Why he smiled. Why he said sorry. Why he made me do it. Head lowered. Said no, that's wrong. Pressed muddied hands to face. He didn't make me. I did it. Because it was right. Shoulders shook. Asked why it feels like I'm wrong. First sob broke out. Covered mouth, made it worse. Smaller, uglier. Father. Voice cracked. Mother. Names ruined me. Bent forward. Forehead almost touched mud. Hair hid me from shame. Choked that I did what I was supposed to do. Asked. Tried. Wanted one to save him. Wanted him to stop talking. Grabbed hair. Twisted it with mud. Said he was my friend. Gritted teeth. He was my friend. Words made me wail. Not cry. Wail. Face twisted. Nobility stripped away. Snot fell. Tears mixed with mud. Body curled. Clotted dirt. Looked exactly like a 13-year-old child. Sobbed, "Mother, please, want to go home." River gave no answer. Behind a tree, Tiny stood, hands over mouth. Followed quietly. Had his answer now. Tears ravished his face. Didn't step forward. Didn't run. Just watched the young lord cry for his mother. Morning came, grayer. Alone on cart. Eyes red, face clean. Others avoiding my eyes. Closed eyes, waited. Cart dipped. Open eyes. Tiny sat in front of me. Held bread. Tore it in half, held one piece out. Said I should eat. Told we'd be at battlefield by sundown. Stared at bread, took it with both hands. Thanked him. Nodded, ate in silence. Cart moved. Noon, wind changed. Smelled of smoke, iron. Trace of battle. Graves, thousands. Northern White Plains. Sky blotted by dark smoke, tents like mold. Banners snapped, supply carts, trenches, wounded. No violence. War was awfully quiet at night. Only groans of those who hadn't died. No glory. Stood slowly. Tiny stood beside me. Whispered how we'd find my people here. I didn't have an answer for Tiny. I just stood at the edge of the war camp, staring at a sea of tents that stretched across the northern White Plains. Or at least, I assumed it was the northern White Plains. Honestly, I had no idea. There were so many tents it looked like an entire city had just sprouted out of the mud. It seemed bigger than Widow's Wall, and I was absolutely certain there were more people here than in my entire barony. I was expecting a fortress, garrisons, guys polishing their gallant horses. Instead, I got a sprawling refugee camp with a body count. I asked myself if maybe it was just because it was night. We stepped deeper into the camp, and Tiny immediately covered his nose. The smell hit him like a physical wall. Smoke, mud, horse dung, human dung, sweat, and something else. He gagged, asking what the hell that smell was. I didn't cover my nose at first. It just smelled like Gregor's butcher yard. But as we kept walking, I realized it was completely different. It smelled like rot. And not cattle rot. Human rot. My eyebrows lowered, I tilted my head, but I still didn't cover my nose. I just looked around until I spotted a massive tent that stood out from the rest. I told Tiny we were going that way. He asked if I knew where to go. I said no. He asked why we were going that way then. I told him it was the largest tent. He followed my gaze to the center of the camp, where huge pavilions sat behind rows of guards, banners, and stacked crates. One banner flew higher than the rest, though the smoke made the colors hard to see. I told him Lord Commander Duncan would be there. He asked if I could just meet him. I reminded him I was still a noble. He looked at me, looked at the camp, looked at the guards, and just said right. The path to the big tent wasn't exactly quiet. Well, it was quiet, but it was hard to ignore the pained groans coming from the smaller tents. Tiny tapped my arm and pointed at a cart rolling by, loaded with bodies covered in cloth. And not just one body. 3 of them, each stack fuller than the last. My eyes darted everywhere. A guy sitting by a fire in full helmet, staring into nothing while his buddy tried to make him eat. A horse lying on its side by a broken wagon, taking shallow breaths while a stable hand stroked its neck. Tiny stayed close, but he was definitely hesitant to walk right next to me. We finally reached the first row of guards near the big tent. I straightened my back, introduced myself as Enel of House Blackwood, and said I sought Lord Commander Duncan. The guards looked me up and down, checked out my old armor, the scratched deer with tree horns, the mud on my boots, and then looked at Tiny hiding behind me. One of them gave a very slight bow, said the Lord Commander was occupied. I said I understood, I'd wait. His face tightened, said that wasn't what he meant. I explained I came for the people of Widow's Wall taken for the war. Gregor the butcher, Ansel the seamstress's son, said I believed Duncan would know where they were. The guard repeated that the commander was occupied, told me to seek the quartermaster. Classic military runaround. I asked where he was. Guard pointed to a nearby tent. So we went there, only for the skinny quartermaster to point us to the western camp. We found the knight in charge of the western camp, fast asleep. When we asked to wake him, we got immediately shooed away and told to check the trenches. The trench master had no idea who the Blackwood men were, but said if we meant the guys from 2 days ago, we should just check the tents. Tiny was already exhausted, told me he didn't think any of these men knew where my people were. My fists curled so hard Tiny gasped and took a step back. I noticed, immediately relaxed my hands, and apologized. He asked what for. I said it was nothing, we were just wasting time. He asked if I couldn't just use my ears. I blinked. He pointed at his own ears, reminding me that back at the inn I said I could hear everything. I thanked him for the reminder and closed my eyes. Tilted my head to the noise of the camp, neck tightening. At first, just noise. Tiny leaned in, tilting his head too like it would help. Then a voice asked if we were the men seeking the Blackwood lot. We both jumped. A woman carrying a bucket of bandages was standing right there. The water sloshing in the bucket was more red than clear. I bowed my head, said yes, my lady. She stared at the deer on my chest, sighed, and pointed in a specific direction. Said they were situated there. I started to thank her, but she shook her head. Said she was there last night, and she was afraid most of my people were dead. Sorry, my lord. Tiny looked at me. My face didn't change, but my hand curled again. No strength this time, just a desperate tremble. I whispered my thanks, said I owed her. She waved me off, said us young lads were killing ourselves in this war. What we owed was already paid. I lowered my head, told her I'd wasted enough of her time. She told me the king could end this war if he wanted to. Just one wave of his hand. Make the barbarians disappear. I asked what she meant. She said I hadn't heard. His Majesty crushed a rebellion in Wehrmacht that wandered too close to First Crown. Didn't even show himself. Did the rebels in from his pretty castle. Tiny's eyes went wide. Asked if the king was that strong. She said she mustn't keep us. Hoped we found the rest of our people, and stepped into the tent next to us. Just for a second, we saw the men inside. One missing an entire leg, the other with his guts spilling out of his stomach. Tiny covered his mouth. My breath paused. By the time we found the Blackwood tents, the moon was high behind the smoke. Small row of tents near the western edge. My family's banners strewn in the dirt, and absolutely no one was there. I stopped at the first tent. Flap open. Half-folded bedroll beside a cracked bowl. Strip of faded red cloth tied to a pole. Next tent had boots outside, one upright, one fallen. No people. Tiny swallowed hard. I stepped inside, crouched by the cracked bowl, touched the rim, wondering who was eating there. Tiny stayed outside. An older guy with a bandaged head and a blanket around his shoulders walked over, asked if I was someone's squire. Tiny said we were looking for the men who were here. I stepped outside, the old man bowed. I asked if they were alive. He said some were. I let out a breath. Tiny clasped his chest. I asked where. He said scattered. No one is where they're supposed to be. He'd lost his people too. I asked for Gregor and Ansel. He shook his head, didn't know names. I thanked him. He went back to his tent. I just stood in the empty space where my people had slept. Picked up the fallen banner. Tried to clean the dirt off, but just ended up ripping it. Stared at the torn insignia, carefully folded it, and put it on a crate. Tiny rubbed his arms, said we could search again in the morning. I said yes, went into the tent, told him there was room. He looked at the inside, then at my sword. Gulped. Said he'd just keep watch. I noticed him looking at the sword, moved it slightly out of his gaze. We were silent for a bit. He bowed his head, told me to sleep well. I started to say Matha, but he walked away before I could finish. I watched him go, then stepped inside. Lay down. Sleep didn't come easily. Tiny sat outside with his back to a post, hugging his knees under a blanket. We thought we wouldn't sleep, but we did. Our morning did not arrive gently. Screaming woke us up. Horns blared. Men shouting, boots pounding through the mud. I covered my ears, thinking the world was erupting again, but when the pounding didn't come, I relaxed. Tiny stumbled through the flap, pale as a sheet. Said he thought we were under attack. I stood up fast, asked what was happening. Another horn, closer. Roars of men, clash of metal. I stepped outside into pure chaos. The night showed me how dreary war was, but this was just a mess. Soldiers rushing out half-naked, some holding only shields. A barbarian on a horse twice the size of any I'd ever seen threw a torch at a tent and vanished. Tiny's breathing got sharp, said they were inside the camp. I stepped in front of him, but that was it. I had no idea what to do next because everything was happening everywhere. A soldier swung at a shadow and hit a guy in the same colors. A barbarian leaped over a wagon, got tackled by an Aldwin soldier, both skewered by a spike. Tiny screamed, asking what was happening. I had readied myself for war. Tiny had too. But nobody prepares you for this. My breath got heavy. Mother's stories surfaced. They were nothing like this. Not even close. But she taught me more than stories. Tiny yelled my name. I saw an Aldwin soldier swinging a spear at another Aldwin soldier through the smoke. I finally moved. Wind cut past the tents as I caught the spear by the blade. Told him to stop. The guy wore his colors. The soldier gasped, let go of the spear, whimpered, started to speak, but saw a shadow flying at me. Yelled behind me. Warning was too late. A giant axe swept through the air and struck my neck. The soldier didn't even have time to wince because the axe just bounced off my skin. Didn't cut a single strand of hair. The barbarian stared. I slowly glanced at him. He was broad, a foot taller than me, red bandana, red paint on his cheek. He was staring at his chipped axe. He stepped back, tried to pull it, couldn't budge it. I reached for my sword hilt, but Ulf's face flashed in my mind. The smile when he accepted his death. I closed my eyes, sighed, lowered my head. The barbarian snarled, pulled harder. I opened my eyes, looked at him, whispered that I knew what must be done, moved my hand away from my sword, told him I was Inel of House Blackwood, made an oath to protect the people of the sovereign. He didn't understand, pulled harder, reached for his knife, and stabbed at my eyes. Blade shattered on impact. I kept talking like nothing happened, fingers tightening on the axe. Told him he was his people too, but he broke his oath. My back straightened. Said I must do what needs to be done. He stared at his shattered dagger. Knew if he didn't get away, he'd die. Pulled again. I let go. He stumbled back. Before he could balance, I was behind him, edge of my palm against his thick neck. Quiet, wet crack. His head fell with his body. Tiny saw it. 2 soldiers saw it. None of them could process it. I turned to Tiny, he flinched. Stared at my face, then my hand. Saw the blood. Saw my fingers trembling. Looked back at my face, saw my lips trembling too. I told him to stay behind me. He nodded fast, followed me as I walked into battle. Everything was chaos, but none of it could hurt me, which made it easier to see who it could hurt. Barbarian raised a spear at a wounded man. I stepped in, caught the spearhead barehanded, pushed it back through the attacker's chest. Another rushed a helpless soldier. I moved gracefully, like Mother taught me, almost dancing. Waved my hand, cleaved the guy in half. Arrow flew at Tiny. I caught it, threw it in the air, caused a small boom that caught everyone's attention for a second. Battle kept going. Down Barbarian rolled in front of me, looking for his weapon. We stared at each other. I just left him alone. Tiny yelled my name. The same Barbarian rushed me with his weapon. I glanced back, disappeared, struck his chin with my palm, threw him several stories into the air. Again and again, they attacked. Again and again, I answered. I literally just walked across the battlefield. Sword broke on my arm, my elbow caved in the guy's chest. Axe caught my cape. I spun, pulled him off balance, stomped him into the mud. 2 Aldwin soldiers about to kill each other in the smoke. I caught both by the armor and threw them apart. Like a quiet storm, I started shaping the war. Aldwin soldiers started rallying behind me. Barbarians hesitated to get close, then stopped coming altogether. Then a roar shook the air. Everyone looked toward the battle cry. A giant was rushing us. Larger than the rest, braided beard to his chest, scars on both arms. Swatted soldiers away like flies. Yelled a Naito. Stabbed his axe into the ground, pointed at me. Swung his arms wildly, smoke tore into the air. Yelled Bateau. Smoke glowed, came to life. He stepped through it, muscles swelled. Breath burned around him, etching words into his skin in red. Flesh crackled into stone until his whole body was a boulder. Nobody warned me the enemy had literal rock golems. Soldiers stepped back in terror. He only had eyes for me. Smoke billowing from his nose, he lunged. Ground cracked. Tremors made everyone lose their footing. Roared again, mud burst. Iron fist swung forward with enough force to whistle. I raised one finger. His fist stopped against it. Red words flickered wildly. His eyes went from anger to confusion to fear. I grabbed his fist, pulled him close, struck him once in the chest. Actually, through the chest. My entire arm pierced his iron chest and came out the other side. Tiny forgot to breathe. Everyone saw it. For a moment, the western camp went completely quiet. People forgot what they were doing, watching me casually pull my arm out. One barbarian stepped back, then another, until they all started retreating. Someone yelled they were running. Aldwin soldiers raised weapons, surged forward, yelling to kill them all. I appeared in front of them, cape flapping, golden hair blinding them. Said no. Most stopped. A mounted knight rode past, sword pointed at the enemy. I stepped in his path, caught his horse by the bridle. He yelled what I was doing. They were retreating. I said yes. He said we cut them down before they regroup. I said they were running. He said they were the enemy. I said we do not attack men from behind. He called me a fool, said this is war. I looked up at him, said, and yet we are still men. Men have rules. He yelled not in war, told his men to charge. Not one soldier moved. He gritted his teeth, dismounted, looked at me, ignored my insignia, sighed, shoulders relaxed, asked me to forgive him, said the war changed him. I couldn't say anything, just looked at my trembling hands. He finally looked at my chest, asked if House Blackwood had a hero like me. I said I wasn't a hero, just Baron Blackwood's son. He didn't know they had a son. Asked if I'd be leading them to battle. Before he could finish, a familiar voice called my lord. I turned. Gregor was moving through the crowd, Tiny leading him. Gregor was huge, wild beard, arms covered in bandages. He looked at me, couldn't believe it. Who else glows on a battlefield? He dropped to one knee. Said, young lord. Men around him froze, lowered weapons. For the first time since I woke up, I felt relief. Whispered his name, said he was alive. He looked up, asked if Lady Mira was with me. Said she was home. Asked about the Baron. Home. His face twisted, asked why in the 7 laws I was here. I sighed. Said Lisa asked me to bring him home. His mouth opened, cleaver slipped, and hit the mud. Cursed that stupid blessed woman. I told him I made an oath under the sovereign to bring him back. He opened his eyes, said I shouldn't have done that. An oath is serious. Most of ours were already with the Earthmother. I looked at the battlefield. Tiny lowered his head. I asked most. Gregor nodded. Tiny asked about Ansel. Gregor's jaw tightened. Said he was taken. My eye twitched. Gregor said during the last push, Northerners came at night, took prisoners when they fled. Tiny frowned, thought they only took women. I looked at the retreating barbarians. Said Ansel looks like a woman. Tiny said, huh. I told Tiny to take care of Gregor. Tiny blinked, asked me. Gregor blinked. He was 3 times the boy's size. Started to say he didn't think, but I was already moving. The knight raised his sword, mounted his horse, but I was already tearing across the western field. Mud and grass exploding behind me as I chased the retreating barbarians north. The knight repeated his order, voice. Lower this time. By the order of the Lord of Widow's Wall, we stay put. No one answered, just stared at my trail. Someone whispered Lord of Widow's Wall, asked where that was. Tiny looked at Gregor. Gregor just stared at where I went. Knight looked at the path, slowly raised his sword. Yelled House Blackwood. A few soldiers repeated it. Then more. Then someone in the back yelled Hail the hero of the western camp. Everyone followed. Tiny whispered to Gregor, asked if I'd be all right. Gregor immediately said no. Nothing will ever be all right after this. Whispered young Baron. At the center of the camp, Lord Commander Duncan stood over a map. Armor covered in dirt and dried blood, hair full of debris. Looked like he hadn't slept in months. Staring at the map for an hour, not blinking. Vision blurring, shook his head to stay awake. Messenger burst in, almost slipping. Yelled the western camp was under attack. Duncan rushed for his weapon, stopped. Asked was. Messenger said yes, attack is over. Duncan asked if they lost the camp. Messenger said barbarians retreated. Duncan went back to the map. Asked why they'd retreat when they had the advantage of a surprise attack. Messenger said the air of Widow's Wall made them retreat. Duncan stared. Asked who. Meanwhile, inside a cramped, dilapidated hut, several women were shackled to each other. Packed so tight they were breathing each other's air. Most cried. A few tried to stay strong. All their strength was targeted at the only man in the group. Lamb's older brother, Ansel. He looked at the women. They were all staring at him. At first they were courteous because he was the youngest. Once they knew he was a man, attitude changed. Felt like he'd been there forever. No windows, just light through gaps in the logs. They stopped staring, which he preferred, but he hated the silence. Most were from nearby villages, some warriors. Some reminded him of his mother. He knew his sister would be all right, but worried about his mother sewing endlessly. If Lamb were here, she'd have claimed the territory by now. Almost made him smile. Chain around his ankles twisted, sliced his skin. He gritted his teeth, hugged his knees. Wished he was as strong as Lamb so he could break the shackles. But he was helpless. Barbarians laughing outside. Sounds seeped through the wood. Women wanted to cover their ears. Didn't understand the words, but the huffing meant nothing good. Someone asked what they were saying. Everyone turned to the only woman chained to the ground. Older, pregnant, near the back wall, hair braided, just a cloth covering her. She hadn't spoken much, but everyone knew she understood the barbarians. She sighed, said it was best they didn't know what awaited them. Her bloated belly was enough of an answer. They all wailed. Ansel pressed his fingers into his knees. Wanted to tell them not to cry, but what would he say? No one was coming. Gregor was probably dead. Aldwin didn't have men to spare. This war would be over if they grabbed me instead of him. Gasped at his own thought, shook his head. I was a child. Bringing me to war would be a disaster. Highly idealistic, stubborn, fearless. Complete opposite of him. Then a scream rose outside, different from their usual bellows. Another scream. Door shook. The old woman went pale. Ansel asked what it meant. She tugged at her chains. Someone else asked. She stopped struggling. Looked at everyone. Said monster. Inyani na Naito. Spirit monster. One woman clasped her hair. Said they angered the spirits. They came to punish them. Another yelled surely they came for the barbarians. Ground quaked violently. Dust showered down. Someone fell against Ansel. He caught her. Another tremor. Low-pitched whistle moved through the camp. Small boom shook the hut. Barbarians screaming. Everyone knew what they were feeling. Fear. Door shook as someone slammed against it. Women scrambled back. Ansel pulled his chain, grabbed a broken piece of wood, pointed it at the door. Barbarian stood there, breathing hard, blood from his nose. Stepped forward, then vanished. Small yelp, something gold and red swept him away. Ansel stood there holding his stick. Heard a familiar language outside. I am not here to kill any of you. Please do not fight back. I do not want to hurt anyone anymore. Ansel's grip loosened. Another northerner shouted, didn't finish. Old woman whispered they were begging for mercy. Ansel asked if barbarians rather die. She said not against whatever visited their camp. Ansel whispered he might know who it was. Stood up, tugged his chain, told the women to follow. One screamed wait. Ansel said he knew him, was sure of it. They heard the change in his voice, slowly got up, followed him. Ansel stepped into the light, squinted. Couldn't understand what he was seeing. Northern camp was completely broken. Everything destroyed except their hut. Weapons scattered in one place, horses tied to a single post. Barbarians tied together with twisted swords. Ansel stepped carefully, women followed. A northerner rushed them, disappeared when the gold and red shadow blew past. Not a shadow. Ansel was right. It was me, tying the barbarian to the lot, using my torn, muddy cape to wipe my hands. Glanced back. Ansel was about to wave, but saw my face. A face the young baron had never made before. Not crying, no frown, but a clouded look in my eyes, similar to the women. But when I spotted him, a forced smile crawled onto my face. Ansel froze, didn't know how to return it. Forced a smile, waved. I carefully approached, bowed to the women. Said I was here to take them home. Eyes moved to their shackles. Said all of them. Ansel looked past me at the bound northerners. Asked if I spared them. My forced smile faltered. Said they stopped fighting. He said they took us. I said I know, we are at war. He swallowed. Asked why they were still breathing. These people put their hands on women. I looked at the women, then the tied men. Quietly unsheathed my sword. Asked which one, Ansel. He tightened his grip on his stick. Stared at me, then at the ceremonial sword of House Blackwood. Voice lowered. Asked does it matter. Back at the western camp, wounded still numbered a dozen, but deaths could be counted on one hand. That surprised Lord Commander Duncan the most. People greeted him. He motioned them to stay put. Told them to settle, rest. Rushed to a guy with an arrow in his thigh, rolled the man's arm over his shoulders, lifted him, yelled for aid. Placed him on a cot, helped rebuild a collapsed tent. Saw people struggling to drag a boulder. Realized it was a barbarian. Tibai the mountain crusher. Squinted at the hole in his chest. Asked if he did that. The knight following him said yes. Enel of House Blackwood. They call him the hero of the West Camp. Duncan stared at the corpse. Subtle smile crept on his face. Said they could use that right now. Told the knight to guard the camp. He'd go. Someone screamed for help. Duncan disappeared. The force of his sprint almost knocked the knight over. Other soldiers ended up in the mud. Knight helped them up. One thanked him. Said he forgot the Lord Commander was a hero. Knight scoffed, smiled proudly. Said the Lord Commander carries himself like a common soldier, but never mistake him for one. His breath is at the 6th depth, second only to the prince. Soldiers asked who was stronger, Duncan or the hero of the West Camp. Duncan arrived at the fallen horse, crouched by the trapped man. Lifted the horse. Everyone backed away because the man's lower half was mangled, guts splayed out, bones sticking out. Duncan calmly looked at him. Man thanked him, voice slurring. Duncan pressed his head down so he wouldn't see his wounds. Told him he'd be fine, Pete of Pigeon's Grove, and he fought well. Pete wheezed, asked if Duncan knew him. Duncan said of course, looked at the priestess. She lowered her head, shook it. Duncan turned back to the dying man, closed his eyes. Asked Pete to tell him about Pigeon's Grove. Pete looked at the bright sky, remembering home. Duncan placed his hand on his chest. Fingers pierced through Pete's heart. Quick, single breath. Just casually euthanized the guy while smiling. Pete died thinking of home. Smile stayed on his face. Duncan prayed the sovereign take him home, pulled his bloody hand away. Told the men to bury him with the brave brothers and sisters. Nodded, turned toward the barbarian camp. Shout rose. Hero of the West camp is back, brought the others. Men rushed to the far end, cheering, wounded trying to stand. Duncan smiled. Asked the knight if he wasn't going to meet the hero. Knight started to speak. Duncan said it's okay, I will meet him too. Told him to bring him to me afterward. But no one needed to bring anyone, because I was already walking toward him. Lord Commander Duncan. A name dropped in the Blackwood Manor more times than I could count, and I probably said half of them myself. One of the heroes of Aldwyn, the Sword of the First Hour, named that because he apparently squashed an entire rebellion in 60 minutes. The guy had multiple books written just about him. And now I was standing right in front of the actual legend. I looked up at him for a second and dropped to one knee. The soldiers who had been quietly cheering for me as the hero of the West camp went dead silent, replaced by soft murmurs as they lowered their heads on pure instinct. For a moment, Duncan just looked at me, took in the torn cape, the ancient armor, the mud on my knees, the blood on my hands, and my golden hair falling over one shoulder. His whole body actually trembled. I guess he finally found someone with actual nobility in a sea of selfish jerks. He told me to stand, saying a lord's son only kneels to his parents, his king, and the gods, not some old soldier covered in mud. I looked up, slowly stood, and started giving him the whole honored to meet you, sort of the first hour spiel. He cut me off immediately, saying he was the one honored to meet the heir of Widow's Wall. His eyes moved to the captives being treated around us, then to the bound barbarians I dragged all the way from the enemy camp. Said he didn't know Blackwood had a son, let alone a hero. I quickly shook my head, told him I was no hero, my flesh was just blessed by the gods, which is why my parents raised me quietly. He nodded a few times, said no mere man could keep a miracle quiet, and that cities standing against a veil often produce hard people. He glanced at Gregor, but when his eyes hit Ansel, he looked away fast. Said Widow's Wall was full of them. He asked if the tied-up barbarians were everyone from the nearby camp. I said no, these were just the ones named by the captives. I left the rest in their camp. Told him it was up to him what to do with them. Just asked them the 3 questions. He stared at me for a second, then laughed and put a hand on my shoulder. Said gods, I truly was Blackwood's son. I blinked, asked if he knew my father. He sighed, called my dad a swan amongst vultures, a noble unlike anyone he'd ever seen, kind to a fault, maybe too kind. Said he reminded him of me. I looked down, muttered that I had spilled blood. Duncan bowed his head slightly, said because of that, I had the gratitude of the crown and its people. I saved these people. The soldiers nearby listened, all slowly bowed their heads, looking at me with even more reverence than before. Duncan turned north again, said with me here, the war would end before the month did. Maybe before the week. Said no other hero answered the call. The king and prince were stuck in the capital. Border lords were guarding their own dirt, and he couldn't leave the camp. His smile returned a bit. Said maybe the sovereign sent me to help. I lowered my eyes. Told him I wasn't here to fight the war. His smile didn't vanish right away, but it definitely changed. Asked what I meant. I said I came to bring my people home. Gregor and Ansel. They were the only ones left. The smile completely fell off his face, and he slowly took his hand off my shoulder. Said the war wasn't over. I said I knew. He said then my people couldn't leave. I looked up at him, said they weren't leaving, I was taking them. Tiny swallowed hard, looking at Gregor, who was stiff as a board. Ansel looked between us, wanting to step forward, but looking like he still had chains on his ankles, even though I'd taken them off. Duncan's face went completely still as he stepped back. told me to choose my next words carefully. I said I already chose them. His hand dropped to his sword hilt. Reminded me I was a noble. Conscripted men were soldiers of the realm. Abandoning the field was desertion. Taking them by noble command was treason, especially from someone representing their house. The soldiers went even quieter. I clasped my chest, told him I made an oath to my people and the sovereign to bring them home. Apologized, but said that oath outweighed everything, even his majesty's. Duncan said no. He made an oath too. To the crown, the realm, the men behind him and buried under him. Couldn't let me take soldiers just because my oath was dearer to me than his was to him. Tiny looked between us, probably thinking we were weirdly similar. Like looking at an older, way more tired version of me. I closed my eyes. Said Gregor was the only grown hand of his household. His son wasn't of age. Under the sovereign's law, he shouldn't have been taken. Duncan's expression shifted. Asked what? I said his soldiers took him. Duncan looked at Gregor, who just lowered his head. That was answer enough. Duncan's jaw tightened, shook his head. Said the fault was his. Apologized to Gregor. Said the men responsible would be found and punished. Gregor started to thank him, but Duncan cut him off. Said don't thank him for fixing his own mess. Then looked at Ansel. Asked about him. I glanced at Ansel, didn't answer right away. Finally said Ansel didn't fall under the same law. Duncan closed his eyes. When he opened them, the softness was completely gone. Said he must do what he must do. Tiny's shoulders hiked up in panic. I didn't move. Said I'd take the punishment myself. Gregor snapped his head up. Ansel stepped forward, telling me to wait. Duncan gripped his sword hilt, raised his voice. Said the punishment for treason was death. The words rippled through the crowd. People gasped. The guys chanting my name earlier just looked at the ground. Duncan stared at me, but there was no cruelty in his eyes. He looked more torn than anyone. Told me I saved lives today, not to throw mine away. Said Gregor could go. He'd write the order himself. But Ansel and the others had to stay. War was almost over. Fight with him, finish it together, then take them home with my honor intact. I straightened up, but my shoulders dropped just as fast. Said I was afraid I couldn't join. He asked why. I said standing here as a soldier would disrespect the sovereign. My hands tightened. Said I wasn't of age. For the first time, Duncan looked genuinely shaken. Everyone looking at the ground snapped their heads up, completely confused because I was built like a brick wall. Duncan stepped closer, lowered his voice, begged me not to do this. I looked up at him. He said there were too many witnesses. If I spoke treason, he couldn't unhear it. If I walked away, he couldn't pretend he didn't see it. I said I knew. He said no, I didn't. I was young. I said I knew. He said I would die. I lowered my eyes. The camp vanished. All I saw was the campfire with Tiny and Ulf. Remembered Ulf's face, his tears, his smile. Oh, I finally got it. Got why he was smiling. I looked back at Duncan and said I knew. He narrowed his eyes, asked if I knew. I said I knew from the start my journey would lead to my death. Gregor stepped forward, begging me not to do it for them. I said I made an oath. Ansel's voice cracked, told me to break it. Duncan told me to listen to my people. I shook my head, told Duncan I'd die either way. If I broke the oath, I'd pay with my flesh. Duncan's hand trembled, drew his sword an inch. Called me a fool. I asked him to let me take my people home, and I'd gladly accept my death there. He stepped forward, blade lifting another inch. Said he couldn't let me leave to die. For the kingdom's sake, I had to live. My hands fell to my sides, one moving toward my own sword. Asked what he was going to do then. He didn't answer. Just let out a single breath that made every soldier there almost collapse. Said he was going to do something he'd regret for the rest of his life. Drew his sword. But right as it left his side, a horn blew from the north. A messenger came sprinting through the mud, nearly slipping. Duncan didn't take his eyes off me, told the guy to speak. Messenger gasped that the barbarian main force was moving. Duncan's jaw tightened, asked how many. Hundreds. The entire camp instantly scattered away from us. We just kept staring at each other. Finally, I bowed. Told him, may the sovereign guide his hand. He said nothing, turned north, cloak snapping as officers rushed him. I turned to Gregor, Ansel, and Tiny. Told them to gather their things. We were leaving. And just like that, the young Baron of Widow's Wall started his journey home with the people he swore to bring back. And his reward was death. The trip back was quiet. Tiny complained about the hardwood of the cart. Gregor told stories about home. Ansel joined in sometimes. At night, The only sound was Ansel's stifled sobbing, but nobody tried to comfort him. He wouldn't have wanted it anyway. Nearing Widow's Wall, only the wheels made noise. Gregor sat with the driver, Ansel curled next to Tiny, rubbing his healing ankles. I looked at Tiny, asked if he was sure about leaving Riverdown. He looked back at the road, said there was nothing for him there. I pointed out there was nothing to steal in Widow's Wall. He shrugged, said maybe not, but at least I was there. I looked down, asked if he meant me. Thought he feared me. He looked away, said he did, but he respected me more. I muttered I didn't know if I deserved that. He said that wasn't my call. Gregor laughed, said the boy made sense. I stroked my chin, said very well, but when we arrived, he still had to receive his punishment for being a thief. Tiny's eyes snapped to me, asked if I was serious. I said yes. He argued he followed me into war. Yes. Almost got an arrow to the knee. Yes. Carried water for the wounded. Yes. Didn't even steal the good knife in the quartermaster's tent. My eyes narrowed. Asked if he considered stealing from the army. He stared at me, slowly turned to Gregor, and asked if it was too late to go back to Riverdown. Ansel actually laughed. Not loud, but enough to bring some life back to his face. By day 3, the trees thickened. Air cooled. Spirits moved between roots and stones, but they were quieter. None came close. Then, finally, Widow's Wall. First just the top of the old wall, then the watchtower, then the gate. I stood up before the cart fully stopped. Something was wrong. Fewer people outside. The fires near the road were gone, just gray patches on the dirt. The field was torn up, one side of the wall freshly mended with wood, and roots were crawling all over the lower part of the gate. Tiny blinked, asked if that was Widow's Wall. Ansel leaned forward, asking what happened. Gregor's eyes went wide, realized the dark forest was awake. Before we could freak out, a loud bell rang. Someone screamed to open the gate, that Lord Enel was back with people. The bell rang so hard it shook the whole city. People came running. Not many at first, but when they realized who it was, everyone poured out of the alleys. Lisa shoved her way through the crowd. Saw her husband, let out a cry that tore through the gate. Shoved past 2 men before the cart even stopped. Gregor jumped down, caught her. She hit his chest with both hands, then buried her face in him, sobbing, calling him a stupid man. Gregor held her so tight Tiny looked worried he'd break her ribs. Then Ansel's mother showed up, holding a needle and thread, like she didn't even realize she had them. Ansel saw her, and whatever strength he had just vanished. Stumbled off the cart and ran. They met in the middle of the street. She touched his face, shoulders, hair, checking if he was whole. He tried to speak, just made a tiny noise. She started crying, saying Lamb told her I was bringing him back. She didn't believe her. Looked at me to thank me, but Lisa fell to her knees. Gregor did too. I just smiled, told them to get up. Glanced at a group waiting for me to say something. Gregor blocked my path. Begged to be the one to tell the others that their families fought bravely. Told me to go home. Ansel stepped up, said he owed me his life. I stared at them, nodded, turned around. Tiny immediately jumped in front of me, yelling at people to make way for the young lord. I wanted to tell him to chill, but it was too late. People were bowing, stepping aside, whispering my name, trying to reach out and touch me. I was used to it. Tiny was wide-eyed at the display. They were treating me like a god. I just smiled and bowed to them, told Tiny this way to the manor. We finally escaped the crowd. Tiny's relief died the second he saw the manor. It was dilapidated. Probably the worst house in the barony, saved only by its size and massive, completely dead garden. Realized the rumors about us being the poorest noble house were dead on. The door opened. Father stepped out. Didn't run, but walked faster than normal. His calm face was way too fragile, like he was afraid running would shatter it. Mother came out beside him. Looked at Tiny, confused. Then looked at me. I bowed, Tiny copied. Said I had returned, raised my head with a smile. That smile completely stopped them in their tracks. Mother stared at my face, shoulders almost fell. Whispered oh no, covered her mouth. Father walked over, didn't say anything for a second. Put a heavy, careful hand on my shoulder. Said I did it, I brought them home. I said yes. Mother didn't approach yet, just kept staring at my smile. Told us to come inside. Cheering was distant once the door closed. Inside was dimmer than I remembered. One window boarded up. Crack in the wall near the stairs. Old carpet rolled away, dried stains on the floor. Father saw me looking, said the forest had been restless. I mentioned the roots on the gate. Mother's hands closed. Father said we'd speak of it later. Nobody moved. Tiny was trapped, didn't know what to do. Mother stepped forward, wrapped her arms around me. I carefully hugged back, lowering my strength as much as possible. Felt her breathing against my chest. She gripped my armor, the torn cape, the cloth underneath. Whispered I was thinner. I said I had eaten. She said that wasn't what she meant. Father put a hand on the back of my head, tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. Mother pulled back just enough to look at me. Said my journey brought them home. I said yes. Father looked at my face, finally spoke. Asked what the journey took from me. I just smiled again. That was when Mother's tears fell. Not loud. Face barely moved. Just stared at me. Then pulled me back into a hug. Her arm shook this time. I didn't cry. Just rested my cheek on her head, held Father's hand. Said I was home. She nodded, said I was home. Father turned his face away. We stayed like that for a while. Well, the four of us. Tiny was still awkwardly standing there. Family separated. Father rushed to the kitchen. Mother took Tiny to a guest room that desperately needed cleaning. I stepped out back to breathe. Looked at the broken terrace from the night arrow. Looked at the tall walls, more cracks now. Walked into the yard. Noticed the ground had more marks. Not from roots. Footprints. Squinted. Heard a whistle. Snapped my head around. A set of dirty little toes was heading straight for my face. I didn't dodge. Just turned my cheek. The kick hit me, shook the air. My hair danced wildly as I slid a few steps across the dirt. Lamb landed in front of me, dropped into a stance with her sword. Arms wrapped in fresh bandages, wild brightness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Tiny screamed from the window, pointing, yelling someone was attacking me. Mother just peeked out, shook her head, went back to cleaning. Said it was just Lamb. Tiny's eyes bugged out. Said I told him she looked like feral folk. Down in the yard, Lamb pointed her sword at me, called me Nemesis, said I had returned. I looked at her, and slowly, truly smiled. Said I was back, hero. She grinned, asked if I was being gracious now. Started to say something. She cut me off, said I should be, told me to watch this. Moved her finger, left a trail of smoke. Breathed out a word, the smoke lit up. Grabbed the glowing word, extended her hand to the side for absolutely no reason, and slapped the invocation against her legs. Yelled. Dirt cracked beneath her feet as she lunged. I moved to meet her. Her sword met my palm. The whole yard erupted. She was way faster now. Not faster than me, but faster than anyone else in Widow's Wall. Except Mother. She swung low, used her hand to launch a kick at my chin. I blocked with my palm, but she threw me several yards into the air. When I hit the apex, she was right there waiting. She already had words in both palms. Raised her left hand to the sky. The word burst forth, making her spin wildly in place. Well, not wildly. Her eyes stayed locked on my face. When she was happy with her speed, she swung her hand and slammed her palm right onto my forehead. The word exploded. I dropped to the ground hard enough to burst it open. She gracefully landed right on top of me, foot planted on my chest. Pointed down at my face, said I had been vanquished, beast. We looked at each other for a second. Then she just fell beside me and started laughing. I laughed too. First time since the road I truly laughed. Turned to her, said she had her breath now. She scoffed, said of course, first depth. Raised her palm to the sky. The bandages around her arm unwrapped themselves. Told me I wasn't the only one with a scar. I glanced at her arm. Long scar running from the top down to her elbow. Skin still red. Asked where she got it. She said I wasn't the only one who fought in a war. I said it looked bad. She said it was bad, thought she was going to lose the arm. Asked if it hurt. She started to say it looked worse then stopped. Said yes. Looked at the wound. Her confident smile faded. Said yes, it hurts. Said she was certain I was hurting too. I said I wasn't wounded. She turned, jabbed a finger into my chest. Didn't say anything, just looked me in the eyes. Whispered she thought she was going to die. I said her name. She repeated it, angrier this time. Said she hated it. Lips trembled, tears drowned her eyes. Seeing that, everything from the past week hit me. Ulf, the barbarians, the war, all the death. Tears broke free from me too. Stuttered that I wanted to go home so many times. Didn't know anyone. Everyone was so different. She nodded, sobbing, said there were so many scary monsters. Giant bear with 4 arms. Her voice cracked, mine did too. We just cried after that. Didn't even talk. For a while, no young baron, no strongest warrior, no hero of the West camp, no girl who fought vehemence. Just two kids under the sky, holding hands because the world got way too big for us. Stayed there for hours until the bell rang again. The bell made me gasp, almost shot up. Lamb sat up, saw my hands trembling, then calming down. Asked what was wrong. I whispered it was time for me to go. She asked what I was talking about. Said I made a deal with Lord Commander Duncan. She squinted, asked if I met the sword of the first hour. What deal? Before I could finish, a messenger screamed for the Baron. Caravan from the south. Merchants. I squinted. Lamb and I looked at each other, pushed each other, and sprinted into the manor and out the front. Far into the gates, banners glowing in the resting sun. Open golden hand with a pinecone hovering above it. Whispered it was a golden hand. Ulrich Goldhand. Banners flowed into the gates. Kids ran beside the wagons, pointing, saying the banner looked like my hair, asking if they made it out of my hair. Adults were just as bad, mouths agape, totally confused until they saw what the wagons brought. Grain, cloth, timber, iron, barrels, crates, livestock. A goat bleated. Kids pointed and laughed because they'd probably never seen one. Caravan stopped in the square. Everyone gathered cautiously, stepped back when the Blackwood family approached, bowed, but kept their eyes on the wagons. Tiny whispered behind me, asking if that wasn't the guy I saved. Pointed at the coach. Lamb scoffed when she saw the old man in a coat, so fine it glistened like my hair. Rings on his fingers, boots completely mud-free. Said he looked soft, elbowed me. I nudged her to shut up. Tiny laughed at her. She glared at him, asked when I was going to tell her who the little tit was. I said his name was Tiny. She raised her voice, about to laugh, but Mother cleared her throat. Lamb straightened up, hit my arm like it was my fault. Ulrich looked around at the cracked walls, thin people, poorly fixed gate, roots still on the ground. Saw me, face changed. Bowed so deep people gasped, called me Lord Blackwood. I blinked, stepped aside, pointed to Father. Said I wasn't Lord Blackwood, he was. Ulrich paused for half a second, smoothly pivoted and bowed to Father. Apologized for coming unannounced. Said he owed me and our house his life since the road. Wanted to pay the debt. Father looked at me, eyes wide. I looked back, confused why he was looking at me. He was trying really hard not to grin. Said there was nothing to forgive. House Blackwood welcomed him. Mother watched him carefully, said he came far. He bowed to her, said gladly. Her son saved his people from feral folk, and from what his men heard on the war road, he didn't stop there. People started murmuring. Ulrich raised his voice so the crowd could hear. Said he heard the young lord broke the raid on the West camp, slew Tibri the mountain crusher, rescued captives alone, returned with prisoners bound alive. Looked at the crowd. Nobody reacted. Most just shrugged, some sighed in relief. Lamb crossed her arms, said it was Enel. Of course it was impressive. And it was super convenient, he got here a few hours after me. Tiny leaned in, agreed, pointed out the dirt on their wheels wasn't road mud. They'd been waiting close by. Lamb waved him off, asked who asked his opinion and what dirt he was talking about. Mother glared at her. She shut up. Father smiled, stepped forward, put a hand on Ulrich's shoulder. Told him to show us what he brought. He'd have his people prep a feast. Ulrich insisted we butcher one of his cows. Father looked at Gregor, who immediately got to work with Ulrich's men. Ulrich gestured to start unloading. Pried a crate open. Smell of grain, dried fruit, salted meat, oil filled the air. Widow's Wall didn't cheer immediately. Almost seemed like they didn't know what they were looking at. Then a kid near the front saw cheese. Actual blocks of cheese wrapped in cloth. A guy gave the kid a small piece. Kids gathered. Started small, then the whole square broke open. People rushed forward, but to Ulrich's shock, nobody grabbed food for themselves. They just helped unload. Tiny stood frozen in front of dried fruit. Lamb walked past, told him to touch it and lose a finger. He pulled his hands back. Said he wasn't going to do anything. She said he looked like a thief. Ulrich's guys tried to organize, but he just watched as Widow's Wall brought everything straight into the Blackwood Manor without being told. Expected them to take some home, but no. Father stood with Ulrich while Mother directed traffic. Grain to storehouse, timber to western wall, iron to carpenters, cloth to Ansel's mother, medicine to healers. Ulrich told Mother these people really trusted us. She said they trusted her husband. Father's smile thinned. Said he trusted them, But that trust led Widow's Wall to what it was now. Ulrich asked if the crown wasn't sending supplies. Father sighed, said not since his father's time. Dark Forest was silent for decades. They didn't see fit to send arms. Ulrich said that shouldn't be the case. Father pulled him away, said they could talk about unpleasantries later, let him introduce him to the people and the reason the place still existed. Ulrich asked where they could set up trade. Father's eyes bugged out. Asked if he wanted to bring trade to Widow's Wall. We had nothing to trade. Ulrich motioned to the crowd. Said we had an empty square and trusted hands to build it. Said trust was the greatest commodity in Aldwin. Bowed. Said he owed his life to my son. Would be lying if he said he wouldn't gain anything. He would. Believed Widow's Wall was about to be the center of everyone's attention. Glanced at me doing something foolish with Lamb. Said anything he gained wouldn't be here without me. Asked that House Goldhand be accepted as sworn merchants of House Blackwood. Bowed deeper. Father stared, then bowed back. For the first time in decades, Widow's Wall started to rise. Days that followed were busy. Almost festive. Everyone had something to eat every day, so that counted. Craftsmen had supplies to argue over. Nobody argued about repairing the manor. Even kids helped. Tiny got officially hired by Father as my hand. Lamb had opinions. Asked why she wasn't my hand. Mother told her she was my sword. That was different. She smirked, looked down on poor Tiny. Just like that, he was part of the manor. Repairs kept going. Ulrich was shocked at the speed. Mostly because of me. I helped everywhere. Lifted beams, carried entire wagons of barrels. Ulrich watched me carry a house-sized boulder without taking a breath. He'd seen a lot of blessed kids. None came close. Thought I wasn't just blessed, might be one of the gods. Made him tremble. Not just my strength, but how loved I was. Laughed with the people, they laughed with me. Week passed, colors returned. Manor got new curtains because the old ones were tattered and I used one as a cape. Roots from the dark forest cleared, no Vemans seen. Father noticed. Mother noticed. Lamb noticed and almost said it. Asked Mother if she didn't think it was strange that as soon as I arrived, the monsters stopped. Mother cut her off. I walked up. Asked what about the forest. I'd been waiting for Vemans, but none came. Mother shook her head. Said the forest just woke up. Lamb and Axe scouted. Most Vemans moving idly. Only a few attacked. I asked why. Offered to scout again. Father joined in with a ledger. Said no need. I was needed here. I looked up at the dark clouds over the forest. Said as he wished. Work continued. Widow's Wall became an actual barony again. With Ulrich and the new market, it would grow more. But through it all, I kept looking up at the bells on the walls, my breath freezing every time. Every morning, I helped rebuild. Every afternoon, trained with Lamb. Every evening, sat with parents, answered questions about the war without really answering. Every night, looked at the bell. Tiny asked one evening, while carrying a massive laundry basket, if I told them yet. I looked away from the bell, asked about what and who. He tightened his grip, said Lord Commander Duncan. I stared at him, looked down. Said I would. Tomorrow. He said he only knew me for weeks, but I was a terrible liar. Heard me say that yesterday. And the day before. Days passed, still didn't say anything. One day, during a meal, the bell rang again. I walked away from the table, rushed to the newly rebuilt terrace. Parents looked at each other, followed. Tiny was there with a broom. Lamb was far away on top of the wall above the gate, hand on her sword, watching riders approach. Saw the banner. Black and crimson wolf. Insignia of His Majesty's military. She rushed to the manor. Leading them was the sword of the first hour. Lord Commander Duncan had come to collect.